Irish Breakdown Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's been a minute since Bryan and I had a show for you guys. It was a couple Fridays ago when we did a mailbag before he went on vacation, but we are back. It is Tuesday, March 11th, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about star power, and we're going to be talking about what that means in the grand scheme of college football. Does Notre Dame have it? You know, you look at past champions. Did they have it? What did they have in terms of star power? And then Bryan and I are going to separate that out between offense and defense. And we sorted it kind of into four buckets. We started out with some of the proven players. We have players we're going to talk about that are on the verge. They're very close. And pretty quickly into 2025, we're going to start to see some of those filter up into the proven category. We have some players that are very capable of doing it. We just have to see a little bit more of a sample size. And then there's players that we're going to keep our eye on really throughout the majority of 2025. Those are the players with the really high ceilings. And can they have a year like, not a lot of people expected a lot of Mitchell Evans in 2023 to have the impact over that stretch of time that he did. Does somebody step up into that role? And we're going to break that down on offense and defense. And we are going to end the show today with a mailbag. There's a lot of time that we're going to be rolling with this show today. A lot of good topics of conversation. So as we're going, be sure to get your questions in, your comments, and anything that you want Bryan and I to cover at the end of the show today. In order to do that, you put a little mailbox emoji or you put MB for mailbag, and we'll be sure to get those started and get those answered at the end of the show today. And as always, the best way to get your question bumped up to the top is you always can throw in a super chat. But today, Mr. Driscoll, glad to have you back on the show. This is the first one we've done together in a while. I'm excited to dive into talking about star power here with you today, man.
Did you miss me?
I did, man. I
on the show with you.
It was cool. I'm not gonna lie. Like being in the, I guess Salty Virginia Peanuts likes to call it the power seat for an entire week. I was like, all right. I was like going back through and like watching old episodes. I was like, all right, this is how Bryan would transition this. I'm going to make sure that this is good to go. But it was a good week. Sean Davis and I ripped through a lot of shows. Had a lot of fun with Bill Bender. But now we're back to the duo that we started the 2024 season with. So,
well, you did a great job last week. I was able to enjoy myself a little bit more knowing that you were in control of things. So I appreciate that very much. It's of course was much needed, but I am, like you said, I'm excited to be back. We were still texting during the trip about obviously things that needed to get done. You did a great job of doing that. So I'm happy to be back, and I'm ready to be back. Ready to talk Notre Dame football, Trev, because, I mean, gosh, spring's 8 days away, right? I mean, a week and a day, right? I mean, next Wednesday is when they get started on spring practice, and it's going to be a very interesting spring. We're still in new territory in a lot of ways, Trev. It's in the past spring, your season's over January 1st or 2nd at the latest. You don't start until 3 months later, and you're 2 months later, sometimes close to 3 months later, and you don't really know where you're going to be. And so the spring practice is kind of getting acclimated. Well, these guys are, less than 2 months. Like if your season's over March 1st and then you start practice, or January 1st and you start practice mid to late March, you got a lot of time off. Whereas Notre Dame missed 3 weeks of potential practice time or off-season time that they would have otherwise had because they went on the title run. So how do you handle that, right? Those are all types of things that we're going to learn about this offseason. But, there's so much to discuss when you talk about how this team is going to be. And those are questions that you guys have. Throw those in the mailbag. I'm excited about it. So I'm looking forward to answer some of your questions today because we're just going to focus on the star power question at the beginning and then dive into, the mailbag at the end and find out what you guys think. But the one thing that we do know, Trev, with all the uncertainty of the new playoff format and how does that impact the offseason and how is Notre Dame going to handle the offseason and this and that and the other, the one thing that is for sure is that to be a championship caliber football team, you need star power. And it's not the same positions for every team. Some teams have dominated because they had star power at quarterback. That was not true really from 2021 to 2023. And I would even argue 2024 because Will Howard was better in that system than I thought he was going to be. I wouldn't call him a star by any stretch. I think he benefited from having stars around him, and he managed the offense incredibly well. He did a great job in the postseason. But would I call him a star? No, I wouldn't call him a star. I would argue that the last quote-unquote star of college football at quarterback that won a title was 2020 with Mac Jones. And that was a stretch of years where you had star power, 19 Joe Burrow, 18 Trevor Lawrence, but then 17 with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, they weren't stars then. Tua became one in college. Jalen became one in college. Jalen is, I would argue, has kind of become one in the pros, at least a winner, right? I mean, the kid just won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I'm not an NFL guy, Trev, but I got to say, I as much I hate the Eagles, mainly because of their fans, and I despise their head coach. I'm not a big fan of the Siriannis, but man, I love Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. It's just as guys.
Oh, yeah.
And to watch them get those rings was a lot of fun to watch. Sidetrack. 2016, Deshaun Watson, star. 2015, Jacob Coker, no. 2014, Cardell Jones, no. 2013, Jameis Winston, yes. 2012, AJ, and 11, AJ McCarron, no. 2010, Cam Newton, yeah. Duh, right? 2009, Greg McElroy, no. 2008, Tim Tebow, yes. So you go over the years, and there have been years where they didn't have star power quarterback. You had to have some level of good quarterback play. So it varies position to position. There's years where teams have star receivers. Ohio State had two star wide receivers. You could, if you really want to, you could argue they have 3-star talents at wide receiver, even only really 2 of them played like stars, production-wise. But Cardinal Tate's a star talent, and when he needed to be a star, he stepped up and played like one. Michigan in 2023, you're going to argue that Roman Wilson was a star? Colson Loveland's a very good player at tight end, but he's not, and I wouldn't put him in the same category as like a Brock Bowers or a Michael Mayer from a production and dominance standpoint.
No.
So it varies from year to year, Trev, and where that star power is from team to team. And it really comes down to what are the things that we do see as trends. You have to have star power, and you need star power at positions that fuel what you do well. So if you're a team that dominates with defensive play, front seven's got to have some star power in it. That's what Georgia used in 21 and 22 on defense. It's just star power in the front seven. And other teams, Clemson in their great runs, that star power receiver, star power quarterback, star power in the D-line. That was where most of their star power was. Now, their 2018 team, which I think was better than their 2016 team, had more star power in more positions, which is what made them so good. They had it at running back. They had it at receiver. They had it at quarterback. They had it on the D-line. They had it at linebacker with Isaiah Simmons. I would argue that I don't know that A.J. Terrell or Trayvon Mullen were necessarily stars individually, but as a duo, they were terrific. And you could say they were a star duo. They complement each other very well.
Yeah.
So there are some teams that have it in more places. Alabama in 2020 had it at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, secondary, but they didn't necessarily have it on the D-line that year the way that they have in past years. So it varies from team to team, but it's got to be about what you're trying to be good at. And so that's where you could look at in past years. What made Michigan so good? Running the football, stopping the run, being elite on defense, and being that kind of team, right? So did they have a star at quarterback? No, I don't think so. Did they have a star at running back? That's debatable, because I think when Blake Corum was healthy, he was really good. And he played like a star in the national title game. I mean, you can't dispute that. And he made some big time plays in the in the semifinal game against Alabama, had over 100 yards of offense. Didn't have a star at receiver, didn't have a star running backs. Michael Parks, Connor Stallions.
I saw that.
That's great. That's great. But very well done. Very well done. But, you saw guys step up and play like stars in those big moments. Donovan Edwards was not a star for Michigan in 2023, but he certainly looked like one against Ohio State, right? And was it 20? Actually, no, he had his big game against Ohio State in 22. So, but the quarterback was not a star, but he played like one at certain moments. But defensively is where they had their stars, right? That's one thing that we can agree on, is they had their stars on defense. You had Mason Graham, you had Jalen Harrell at times look like one. You're talking the secondary with Will Johnson on the back end of the defense. And so, they had their star power that year. You had one of the best slot corners in all of college football, and Mike Sanders still. So they weren't a team loaded with stars, but they had really good football players everywhere, and they had enough star power on both sides of the ball to step up, or they had guys that stepped up and played like stars in key moments. We could argue that Blake Corum wasn't a star in 23 because he wasn't the same player as he was in 22 before the knee injury. That's a fair conversation to have. But look at when he was at his best in 23. It was against Bama and Washington. And that to me is where you say, okay, there was some star power there with him. And so those are different things you look at, Trev, and you evaluate when you're breaking it down. He played like a star in the win over Michigan of Penn State. Didn't complete a pass in the second half. What did they do in that game? Just rode Blake Corum the entire second half. So the point is, you need star power. You go to 2022. You look at that Georgia team in 2022. That team absolutely had star power. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, you look at that 2022 team on offense. You look at your pass game. You had Brock Bowers, one of the best stars in college football. Ladd McConkey had star talent, although he wasn't. Yeah, he was a little banged up that year, but look what he did in the title game. 5 catches for 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. Had 5 for 69 in a touchdown against LSU in the SEC title game. So, he had his moments where he stepped up and played like a star, but you had Brock Bowers in that offense, and he was absolutely a star. Defensively, you certainly had a lot of stars, especially in 2021. I mean, the 2021 team especially, you had Jalen Carter and Kobe Dean and Nolan Smith. You certainly had plenty of it there. 2022, Jalen Carter was a dude. I mean, he was a dude. He wasn't as dominant as he was in 2021 because of some injury issues, but he was still a dude. You had plenty of star talent, star power on that team. You go back 2020, the Alabama team, we talked about it. Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, Najee Harris. They had plenty of it there. It's there. We could spend the next hour going through examples of teams that have star power, Trev, but I think it's even more important now. That's something that I want to argue is it's always been important to win a title. I think it's more important now if you're going to make a run, and it's got to be, and when we say it's not just have a guy. And so I would look back at the 2024 season for Notre Dame and say on offense, did Notre Dame have a lot of star power, like a guy that just from start to finish will start? I had one, in my opinion. I had one guy that really from the first game of the year to the last game of the year, you could say that guy was a star. He was an elite talent. But that guy didn't do a whole lot in the playoffs because he was injured and because other teams focused on it. So you needed other guys to step up, and at different times, different guys stepped up. But he also stepped up when he needed to. When you look at that first playoff game against Indiana, and showed that's a dude right there. I mean, that was a complete game changer, that play by Jeremiah Love. But after that, what's the big play that Jeremiah Love had in the postseason? It was 9, 10, 11-yard runs here and there. But teams focus so much on him, you said, okay, somebody else got to step up. So, Jordan Faison did in the first game. Riley Leonard did in the second game. Jaden Greathouse did in the third game. And then, and the fourth game. But the point is, Trev, is you need star power, and it's got to be more than one. Because as we saw in the postseason, when teams took Jeremiah Love in the run game out, it took Notre Dame a while to kind of get their offense going. Where, with Ohio State, so you put your resources towards stopping Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and then you're going to say, what are you going to do? Just go play man coverage for 95% of the game against Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Buka, and and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis. Like, okay, good luck with that. There aren't a lot of teams that can do that. And okay, we're gonna really make sure we're gonna play a lot of zone and double team Jeremiah Smith, and that's our game plan. And good luck stopping the run game. And like you look at the Texas game, I thought Texas did a brilliant job of slowing down the Ohio State pass game. Yeah. What broke that game open? Travion Henderson taking a screen pass 75 yards for a touchdown. That star power. And you need it on both sides of the ball to win a championship, unless one side of your team is so exceptionally dominant that it doesn't really matter. And we've seen that a little bit. I would argue that was the case with LSU in 2019. But even then, K'Lavon Chasen was not a bum. Patrick Queen was a first-round draft pick. I mean, their defense wasn't great, but they still had some dudes on that team, Trev, that were outstanding players that you could argue were star players, even though their defense wasn't a star. Yeah. Well, why does that matter? Even if your defense isn't necessarily great, you still need to have those guys that can step up and have those moments. and make those plays. And we certainly saw that from the LSU defense, even though they weren't necessarily a team that was, how do I say this? They didn't play elite defense that year, but they didn't have to. They played great complementary defense that year to one of the best offenses we've ever seen. And part of that was you had a couple guys you could just kind of lean on that team. So the point is, Trev, is that's always been needed. But now to win 4 games, which is what Notre Dame needs to do, you have to be able to – you have to have star power. You need more of it, in my opinion, than what they had in 2024. No doubt they had stars in 2024. And we could argue that had some of those stars not gotten injured, maybe we're having a different conversation. And that's very true. I'm looking at what they had the last 2 rounds.
Yeah.
You had basically, in my opinion, 2 true stars on those 2 teams, in my opinion. Jeremiah Love, Xavier Watts. You want to argue for anybody else, we can have that. But that's because you didn't have a Riley Mills. You didn't have a Boubacar, who maybe he becomes a star by the end of the year. Riley was playing like one. From Louisville till the time he got hurt against Indiana, Riley Mills was playing like a star. Riley Leonard had his moments here and there. Jadarian Price had some moments here and there. Jaden Greathouse certainly had moments in the last 2 games, but you didn't have those other guys that were take over a game guys outside of Xavier and Jeremiah Love. As we saw, that wasn't enough to win a championship. It was enough to get you to the title game, but it wasn't enough to win a championship. And as much as Notre Dame battled in that game and played with such great heart, they still lost by 11 and were still down by 24 in the second half. And there's a reason for that. So the reality is to get to that next level, there needs to be an upgrade in star power for Notre Dame. Now, part of that's you need some luck and you need to stay healthy. And as we've said, Trev, I think Notre Dame's a different-looking football team if Mitchell Evans is 100%, if Jeremiah Love's healthy in the playoffs, if Boubacar Traore's healthy, if Riley Mills is healthy. They would have had another star player if he doesn't go down at corner, and Benjamin Morrison. He was a star. We'll discuss Leonard more when we get to the defensive section about whether he was or wasn't. We'll have that conversation. But they certainly had one in Benjamin Morrison. And when you lose those kind of guys, it's hard for just somebody to come and become a star right in the middle of the season. Kind of saw it a little bit with Leonard Moore, which we'll talk about later, but that's the reality of it, Travis. Ohio State had more star power than Notre Dame did. And they had it at more positions than Notre Dame did as well. Yeah. It wasn't just they were all at receiver and running back. I saw that on the secondary as well. But that's kind of where I'm at with this discussion, Trevor, is there's no doubt to win 4 games, you need star power. We've seen it throughout history. I think it's self-explanatory in a lot of ways, but you're going to face teams when you've got to win 4 games. You're going to face teams that are good enough to take away certain parts of your team away. And if all your star power is in one position, then and you're playing a team that's really good at stopping that one thing, and you don't have anything else to go to, that's how you get knocked out of the postseason. Look at Penn State. They got star power at running back, and in the first half, you saw it. They got star power at tight end, star power at running back. Second half of the game, Notre Dame was able to limit both of those a little bit. And you needed, hey, we need somebody at receiver to step up and help us out. Nothing. They had Abdul Carter at defensive line, had a couple guys on the defensive line, but Notre Dame was able to neutralize that. They didn't have any star power in the second or third level. Notre Dame took advantage of that in the second half. Right. And so that's where I look at it and say, when you play teams in the really good teams in the postseason, you need star power. What was Georgia lacking this year compared to previous teams? Star power.
Yeah.
They were really good in certain spots, but they didn't have – who was their star on offense? Who's that guy that could take a game over for them on offense the way Brock Bowers could? They didn't have that guy. So when they play a team like Notre Dame, who just as a unit, their defense is better than their offense, there wasn't that one mismatch or that one dominant player that could really light things up the way that Brock Bowers could in past years.
Or draw enough attention away for somebody else to emerge.
Bingo.
Like
a Lad McConkey. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great point. So, Trev, that's where I'm at is to win 4 games, you need star power, but I would argue that Notre Dame needs more of it now than they have in the past. And they need it to be more balanced across the roster than it has been. And that's sort of that next step. And so that's my argument for why we're having this conversation. it's fun to have a star power talk, but this isn't just about, hey, let's have a fun Tuesday afternoon talk about star power. It is going to be that because I'm excited to talk about this topic, but it's also very important for Notre Dame to become that championship winning team. They have enough star power to be a championship contender. We just saw that. We've seen them make the playoffs before, but it needs to go to another level for them to kind of kick down that door and finally get that first title since 1988.
You and I are in the same boat there. When we talk about star power, a lot of people can kind of confuse that. They draw a lot of attention from national media. It's like, well, so-and-so said that this player is a star. They're always on the cover of this, and they're always on, the topic of this podcast, et cetera, et cetera. To me, and you brought up two of these points while we were sitting around game planning for the show. And it was, for you to be a star, one, you affect the opposing team's game plan week in and week out. They're somebody that when you get the scouting report on a Sunday or a Monday, it's number 4 in blue and gold is that dude. Number 2 is everything that you just talked about is the impact in the postseason. Are you able to draw enough attention away like Jeremiah Love did for a Jaden Greathouse to emerge and go off in those games? Or for a Brock Bowers to draw all the attention away in the secondary, has to get double teamed every time Lad McConkey has a great season. You go through and you think about some of the past Alabama teams where O.J. Howard had those random playoff games where he went off. Well, it's because he was on teams with guys like Derrick Henry and Calvin Ridley and players like that. The final one for me is you go through and you think about star power, and it's the players when they do perform well, it's not a surprise. Like when I go through and I think about Jaden Greathouse's 2 games in the national championship, was I surprised from a skill set standpoint? No, I wasn't, because I knew he was capable of doing that. But was I surprised to actually see it happen?
It was more finally, as opposed to where did that come from? It wasn't Timmy Smith in the Super Bowl against the Broncos. Like, who's Timmy Smith? I didn't even know they had a guy named Timmy Smith on their team. It's not that, Trev. Like, it's more of, well, finally they're making him a focal point of the offense. Because how many times did you and I say leading up to that game, meaning weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that look, when this guy gets the ball, he does damage. Get him the ball more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great point. It wasn't like, wow, I didn't think Jaden Greathouse had that in him. And whereas if like I don't even want to say a name, but like, there's other times where it's like if that guy would have stepped up and gone off in that type of environment, like, wow, I didn't know that guy had it in him. Like I love Jaden Thomas, so I'll say this, but like if Jaden Thomas would have gone out and had 5 catches for 130 yards in the playoffs, I'd be like, wow, I did not see that coming. I did not know he had that in him. And I love the kid. He was an incredibly valuable member of this football team. There's a reason Notre Dame designed several 3rd and 4th big 4th down plays to go to him in a literally an ISO route where it's either he's getting the ball or it's just not going to work.
Absolutely.
But he's not a star. He's not a game changer. He's not a guy that takes over a football game. So if he'd have done it, you'd be like, wow. Where, like, to your point, when Greathouse does it, you're like, it's about freaking time. You know what I mean? So yes, that's a great point, Trev. Great point.
Yeah, for me, when you're talking about stars, they're the players that at the end of the game, when you go back and you do the recap of how they performed, it wasn't like oh my goodness, it was duh. Going back through all of the star power performances, it's like, man, Jeremiah Love had a great run against Indiana. It's like, have you watched the last 12 games? that shouldn't be a surprise. Like when you talk
run
about
he ripped off. Yeah.
It's like, did you see him outrun everybody? Yes, I have. I've watched him do it 13 times this season. I don't know about you, but that to me, in addition to all the things that you listed off, that's what star power is to me, just from the eye test. As you go and you sit back, it's like, that guy goes off. And you can see it in the past history of all of the players that we had just spent naming off.
And sometimes, to your point, Trev, star power isn't about you going off. It's the attention that the other team has to pay to you results in other people making big plays. And that's kind of how a lot of times, like when I watched Georgia in 2021 and 2022, it was kind of like, Brock Bowers maybe didn't do a lot of damage in that particular game, but you watched how much the other team focused on him. You kind of understood that because they were they were just spending so much time trying to stop him, and that opened up opportunities for other players. I mean, you look at the title game in 2021 at the end of the 21 season when they beat Alabama. Brock Bowers had 4 catches for 36 yards. That's it. But part of the reason that Georgia won that game is because of that. Yeah, George Pickens had 1 catch for 52 yards against solo coverage. A.D. Mitchell had 2 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, partly because he was getting one-on-one. And then your 2 running backs combined for 161 yards and a touchdown on only 19 carries because the defense was so set on stopping Brock Bowers that it opened up some of those other opportunities. And we've seen that before as well. I think, I love to bring up Broncos references, but I think of the Super Bowl and against the Falcons and why that play action worked to Rod Smith was because they were so focused. First down, you're running the ball to Terrell Davis, of course. So those safeties are going to come flying down on first down when they see, run action. Denver saw that, and they knew they could take advantage of Eugene Robinson, and they were designing a big play to Rod Smith. So it was Terrell Davis's presence that opened up that opportunity. And you see that all the time. And so it sometimes being a star isn't just about, hey, you put up numbers, but did you take over a game? Did you impact the game in a big way? But as you said, I love the point you made, Trev. Impact the game isn't always what you do. It's what your presence does for your teammates. There were games that Lewis Nix in 2012 would have a great game and he'd finish with 2 tackles, no tackles for loss. But you're like, Manti was running free all game downhill because he was dominating at the point of attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not always about your production. Sometimes it's your dominance is creating opportunities for other people. And that's part of being a star player as well. But it all focuses around you're so dominant that you force the other team to really build their game plan around trying to stop you and keep you from doing what you do. Which is why I think to some degree you could kind of put Riley Leonard in that conversation for 2024 because teams spent so much time trying to game plan to stop him that I do think it opened up some other opportunities. That's a debatable thing that we could a debate we could have. Don't care to have it right now because it's looking backwards. I want to talk about what's going forward. Yeah. But whether you think Riley Leonard was a star or not, what you can say is how teams game plan to him did at times create opportunities for other players to make big plays. And that's one of those criteria for being a star. But then also being a star is at times you are taking games over, especially big games. And so, yeah, we could go back and talk about Brock Bowers and, he really didn't do a whole lot in the title game and he didn't really do anything against Alabama, but you look at other games that season, and you're like, yeah, but did you see him against so-and-so? And did you see him against so-and-so? And did you see how dominant he was in this other game that he had? And did you see how dominant he was in this other game that he had? And, those are things that stand out to me. It's like, okay, he didn't dominate against Alabama for the reasons that we discussed. But did you see what he did against Alabama in the semifinal game? Well, the SEC title game? Why did Alabama spend so much time trying to stop him? Because he had 10 catches for 139 yards and a touchdown against Bama in the SEC title game. Yeah. Because he had 3 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Georgia Tech. So you look at him and you say, how did he play in the game against number 11 Kentucky? 5 catches, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. How did he play at ranked Auburn? 2 catches, 43 yards. Those are the things you look at and say, okay, that's why teams focus so much attention on him is because he was such a dominant player in those big moments and in those big games. And that's what made him a special player. I mean, and then of course his so would it be sophomore year, 2022? He was pretty dominant in all the postseason games. 6 for 81 and a touchdown against LSU in the SEC title game, 4 for 64 against Ohio State in the semifinals, and then 7 for 152 and a touchdown against TCU in the title game. So there are times when you're the focal point of the defense, and that creates opportunities for others. But then there's also opportunities where you are also stepping up and making big plays and having those big money games. So that's what star power is. And it's offensively, it's defensively, it's all around. And I don't know that you can point to a team that didn't have some level of star power, usually on both sides of the ball. And that's what Notre Dame is going to need to have. So the question is going to be, and what we're going to address here the rest of the show, Trevor, is do they have star power? Yes. We'll discuss it. Do they have enough star power to compete for a title? That's more to be determined. And we're going to have some fun talking about that next. But before we get to that point, folks, do us a favor. Take 3 seconds of your time. See that thumbs up button right below us. Go ahead and click that for us. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm, helps promote our show, helps us kind of get to the point where more and more people are going to have access to seeing and seeing the promotions of our show. We would greatly appreciate that very, very much. Make sure you're notified to the channel. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you can hit the notification so you know when we're going live. But as always, the best way to support Irish Breakdown is to become a member at irishbreakdown.com. Got some new features that we're going to be rolling out here over the next few weeks. One of them is I'm offering offer analysis so when Notre Dame offers a player, I will do sort of an offer profile, break down some film, talk about the guy a little bit. I got to get caught up on some offers that happened in the week I was packing for vacation. I was on vacation, so I put a couple receiver profiles out today. I'll have a lot more coming up as I look to get caught up on some of the more recent offers. So just one of the many reasons it's great to be a member at the Irish Breakdown Premium channel, which is the Champions Lounge, and you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com.
All right, Brian, we spent the first part of the show talking through star power in general. Why does Notre Dame need it? The past trends of previous national championship winners. Now we're going to get a little bit more granular and start talking about the offensive side of the football and what Notre Dame has in terms of star power. Quick refresher, or if you just hopped into the show, we broke things down into 4 separate buckets. We talked about the proven star power that Notre Dame has going into this season. We talked about players that are on the verge, meaning they're really close, and we're going to find out probably first couple weeks of 2025 if those on the verge players are correct. Then we start talking about the players that are capable. And then finally, we're going to talk about the players to keep an eye on. Ones that might not have produced a whole lot in 2024, but maybe you saw glimpses or their ceiling is high enough where you should probably be paying attention to it. But offense, Brian, we alluded to him a little bit earlier. It's a very easy place to start when you start talking about proven star power on Notre Dame's offense this season.
I would argue that Jeremiah Love, obviously who we're talking about here, I would argue that right now Jeremiah Love is the only established star that Notre Dame has. I think a case could be made for a one guy on defense. We'll get to that. Leonard Morris, who we're talking about there. We'll get to that in the defensive section. But there's no doubt that Jeremiah Love is a star. I mean, the production was there this season. 1,000-yard rusher, and he got to 1,000 within the normal time frame of getting to 1,000. It wasn't like he only got to 1,000 because he played 16 games, right? It wasn't that type of season for him. I believe he got to 1,000 in the playoff game against Indiana, I believe, is when Jeremiah Love went over 1,000 for the season. So, you look at that, heck of a football player and impact player, not just production for the sake of production. He's not getting numbers because he's carrying the ball 35 times a game. He's not getting numbers because, he's in a system that you got this great offensive line that just opens up these gaping holes for you. And, he's a star because he is a star. He's an elite athlete. What has really resulted in Jeremiah becoming a star, because Jeremiah was a top 50 player for me coming out of high school. I didn't have him as a 5-star. I had him as a 5-star upside guy. And the reason why is because he was always a great athlete. But the question is, he was still learning how to be a running back. And he took a big jump from his junior to senior year because he was only a top 100 guy for me as a junior. The 5-star upside was always there. But he started to show more of that feel for the game. As a freshman, he just was a really athletic kid that didn't always hit the hole the right way. And then as a sophomore, you saw such a greater feel for the game. And that's what makes him special. It's not just the elite athleticism and the fact that he can jump over people. That's all great. But what Jeremiah showed as a sophomore, that's even more important than, oh, great, you can hurdle people, is he showed that he's a complete back. I mean, some of his best runs this year were like 4-yard gains. His best run of the year was a 2-yard touchdown run where he just showed a level of physicality and want to and toughness that you love. But it was that knowing when, hey, man, it's 3rd and 2. If the hole opens up, I'm taking this sucker to the house. But the most important thing is I got to get those 2. He understood that. And I think there was a couple times in the playoffs where I thought especially against Indiana, I thought he maybe was trying to do too much. I was like, hey, man, just chill out. Just do what you do. Penn State, he was that way a little bit. then when he settled down at halftime, came out second half, and he was just boom, just gashing Penn State 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards. And it was just that overall feel for the game that Jeremiah showed, where he's now not he was used to be a great athlete that was learning running back. Now he's a great running back that happens to also be a great athlete. And that's what makes him a star, in my opinion. So it's the production. It's the elite athleticism. But to be a true star, you got to have it up here in between your ears too. And you got to have it right here in your chest too. And what Jeremiah Love showed us this year as a sophomore, he's got both of those as well as just the tools that God gave him. And so that's something that gets me fired up about what he is. But he is an established star. He's a guy you are building your team around, defense's game plan around him, and that's going to continue in 2025. So as long as he's healthy, and from what I've heard and what I've seen in summer workouts, he's fine. He's going to be big time. And I also honestly wouldn't be shocked if he's also a captain this year. I'm not saying he will be. I don't have any. I'm just saying, like, knowing him, knowing the reputation he has in that locker room, I'd actually be a little surprised if he wasn't voted a captain as a true junior, which says a lot about him as a football player beyond just the elite athleticism that we're even having this conversation. So that's kind of where I'm at. He's an established star, Trev, and that's a great foundation to build your offense around in 2025.
You brought up something in the first segment of the show talking about your star power kind of needs to fit your identity as a football team. And Marcus Freeman wants to be a line-driven program that has the ability to run the ball and stop the run. And Jeremiah Love fits that bill. Of all the criteria that we listed off about what it means to be a star, the conversation around Jeremiah Love is fascinating because we talked about stars in the postseason will draw attention on game plans. We've seen that before. And it enters the conversation as more of it, especially on offense, which we're getting ready to break down here. But when you reach a certain point in the postseason, the star power Notre Dame had last year got them to the point that they got to last year. They just ran into a team with a little bit more of it, if we're just being truthfully honest. But Jeremiah Love coming into this season, one, I saw Archer put it in the chat. He said that there's a chance that both number 4s on offense in the national championship game are probably going to be two of the best offensive players in the country. And I wholeheartedly agree, because Jeremiah Love is that guy. He's the guy that we sit down every Saturday night in a post game, and we're breaking down other aspects of the game, and we're sitting around talking about who else had a really good performance. And then always at some point in the night, it's, man, did you see Jeremiah Love? Did you see this play that he did? And he started to do it in other facets without having the ball in his hands. That's a pretty quick jump from an electric true freshman with a lot of potential to just your true sophomore year. I mean, some of the best impactful plays that he had this season was as a lead blocker around the goal line. He took a lot of pride into laying the smackdown on somebody around the goal line, almost as much as he took pride in scoring touchdowns himself.
His two most not flamboyant. What's the word? Exuberant celebrations this year on a touchdown were not on his own touchdowns. They were him laying somebody out and him getting up, just going nuts. Like when he scored a touchdown, he'd do the, thing. And it's kind of like, yeah, I got mine. And then he goes celebrate with his teammates. When he laid out some guys out for Riley to go score, that's when Jeremiah showed some, whoa, that kid's fired up about that touchdown. That says a lot about, like you said, that pride that you're taking in it. And I'm gonna be I'm tougher than you. I'm stronger than you. I'm not just faster than you. Yeah, I can jump over you, but I'm stronger than you too. I'm tougher than you too. I mean, the run that I loved obviously the 98-yard touchdown run was a great run, but he's really fast and they open up a big hole and he read it perfectly and scored. My favorite run in that game was when he face planted that DB on that outside run where he literally just shoved his head into the ground. I'm like, okay, that's a man run right there. That's a grown man run right there. Yeah. And that's just one of those things that really makes him a special player, Trev. And I love that you brought up the blocking stuff, because that's so true. That's what shows he's not just a get me the ball or I'm not happy kind of guy. You ever see him on the sideline when Jadarian breaks off a big run?
Oh, yeah.
And he's just as fired. He's actually more fired up when that happens than when he scored. Same with Aeneas. And then you see that from Jadarian as well. You want to know why the running backs haven't transferred? That right there. It's that brotherhood that Dylan McCullough built in that room that Coach Sider is now going to have to continue. I love that room, but that's part of being a star is, are you a great teammate? And it's not, I mean, you can have stars who aren't great teammates, but it certainly helps if you're trying to win a national title. Mm-hmm. And you saw that from Jeremiah Love. That's the kind of stuff that makes me, that's why you and I say, Trev, we won't be shocked if he's a junior captain. It's not because he's their best player. It's because we think he's a great teammate and a great leader as well. Being a great player does not equal, I would never give my best player a C on his chest just because he's our best player and want to keep him happy. The C on the chest should be all about the guys that are the true leaders of your football team. And that's why we advocate for that. And so he certainly has that. So that's the one, I would say, established star that Notre Dame has on their football team, but especially on their offense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keeping the train rolling here. Next bucket we're going to start talking about here, Bryan, is players that are on the verge. And it's ones that coming into this season, we saw glimpses in 2024, and it would not surprise us in any fashion if very quickly in 2025, they solidified themselves as a week in and week out star. The first guy that I know we're going to talk about, and it's fitting because I just saw Salty put his first thing in the chat, is wide receiver Jaden Greathouse. And he's somebody that we saw a lot from this postseason from. A lot of the reasons that inhibited, for me specifically, of him moving into that proven category, some of it were for reasons outside of his own doing. It's when you walk away from a game with one target, it's tough for you to kind of make that jump. He is all more poised to become a proven star in 2025.
So a lot of our shows, Trevor, about looking at the spring. But the reason this isn't a spring-focused show entirely, and there will be some things we're going to talk about that we're going to be keeping an eye on in the spring and things along those lines, is because a lot of these guys aren't going to me, I don't think, are going to be getting the full repertoire this spring. I don't think Jeremiah Love is going to be getting a full normal spring workload. I don't think Jaden Greathouse is as quite as much. So there's some different things that and then some of the guys on this list are guys that aren't even going to be around this spring, Malachi Fields and Boubacar Traore, who are for different reasons won't be practicing. But this is more of a projecting into the 2025 season. But there are some things I want to see from Jaden this spring. I want to see him repeat the spring he had last year. I want to see him be more of a leader. And it's also not a surprise that the first two guys we're talking about are two guys that we've talked about as potential captains because of the work ethic, because of the leadership they provide. But what I love about Jaden Greathouse is he was a money player for Notre Dame. When you think about, there's a lot of things we could talk about of why he could potentially be a star player. He's a very quality athlete. He's a great ball skills. He's smart. He knows how to get open. His football IQ is exceptional, in my opinion. He's got very good ball skills. The last 2 years, he's had one drop on all the targets he's had, and it was the most easy catch he could have ever made, and you could just see it in his face, like, what just happened? I've never done that before. Didn't drop another ball the rest of the year, so he clearly didn't let it get to him. But there's levels of his game that need to improve. I think more consistency off the ball is going to help him, more urgency as a route runner. His top ends at times are a little inconsistent. That factored into him maybe not getting the ball at times. And so there's different things that certainly he can get better. He's not a complete player at this point in time, which is encouraging because he is a young guy, can get better. But he's also, what I love is on top of being all those good things that we've talked about, the great ball skills, knows how to get open, great feel for finding soft spots in the zone, knows how to win off top ends, things along those lines, is Jaden seemed to be at his best in the biggest moments. And you saw it from the first game of the year to the last game of the year. He had biggest catch in the game was like what, an 8-yard gain on a 3rd and 5. Yeah. You think about the game against Penn State, and we all think of the long touchdown where he just smoked the guy off the line of scrimmage and, catches the ball, jukes another guy, goes in for a long touchdown. Big moment for Notre Dame, obviously. But he had 3 third down catches in that game that were way more important, or just as important as that. It's hard to say way more because that one resulted in 6 and the others didn't. But that you don't get to those points if he doesn't make those plays. You think of that 3rd and 9 where they throw the back shoulder and he just makes I still don't know how he caught it. I just thought the ball was going to be too high. I know he can make that kind of catch. I just thought the ball was too high. And just to watch him go up and snatch it. He had the other third down catch where he just kind of found that soft spot. Riley was running left, and he kind of dumps it off to him. But Jaden does a great job of finding that soft spot. But then, what was it? The final drive? It was the field goal drive, I believe. He caught a third down pass on that. I believe it was a third down pass between two guys. And what I loved about the play, Trev, is that it was a play where he couldn't run the route the way you needed to run the route, or the way you're taught to run the route. He saw, okay, this is going to break down. And if I keep going, I'm going to run right into the opposing team. And I can't take that chance. So what he did was he sat down, presented himself to the quarterback, and the quarterback got him the football. And that's just football IQ, but then also having the wherewithal and the concentration to be able to stop and turn back and make a catch in between two guys. I mean, it was really just an exceptional play. And, it's hard not to love that kid when you're seeing him make those kind of plays and those kind of moments, Trevor. And that's really, to me, what makes Jaden Greathouse so special is the big plays are awesome. But he's such a clutch money player that it adds to his value as a player. I'm actually going up and looking at that, trying to find that play. And because I do believe it was on the last drive of the game. But I'm gonna go try and find that here real quick.
What was it on that sprint out left? That Riley?
No, it was on a different one. That was earlier in the game. This one I'm trying to find. So I think it's this play right here. It's 3rd and 5, and it was just a drop back pass. So let's see here. Is this the play? I think this is the play. He's running like a little pivot route. No, that's the sack. I'm trying to find this play here. Give me a second here. Was it after the interception? I'm pretty sure it was on the last drive of the game, on the field goal drive, but I'm trying to find it here real quick. But point is, Jaden Greathouse is also a money player. And I think it was just 3rd and 3. Yeah, it was the 3rd and 3. Let me see here. Well, he was number 3 in the trips, 3x1. It's a sprint out. He was running an option, and he throttles, and he throws it back shoulder. So it was a sprint out, but it wasn't the scramble sprint out that I'm talking about earlier where he just worked behind and then Riley dumped it off. He was running a little sprint out. Jaden's running an option route as a number 3 guy. Just settles right in that hole. Number 6 and 7 are on opposite sides of him. Riley throws it inside where only he can catch it. Makes a great back shoulder type of snag, convert it, sets up the game-winning field goal. Because at that time on 3rd and 3, if they don't complete that ball, Trev, they're at the 35-yard line. Now you're talking about needing him to make a 53-yard field goal.
Yeah,
that's a little tougher task, and he catches it and gets the ball all the way down to the 25. You're out of field goal range before the play is snapped. His play on 3rd and 3 gets you in field goal range, and you win the football game. Like, that was every bit as big as any of those other plays that he made in that game. And those are the things that you look about him and you get excited about it, because it wasn't just that game. I mean, he did it against Louisville. He all year, 3rd down, is like he had 1 catch for however many yards, but there was a 3rd and 7 on a touchdown drive that he made that 1 catch, and that's something that just adds to what makes him such a talented football player, and why I do believe he has star power. Because it's one thing to be clutch, it's one thing to be a good player and money and all that kind of stuff, but can you dominate? And that's a different question. And there are players, as you and I know, Trev, that are really good football players, but they're not guys that you would constitute, you would argue are stars, because they're just not dominant. They don't have the production potential to be dominant. They don't have the talent to be dominant. They're good football players, but they're not just dominant football players. And my thing about Jaden Greathouse is I think he's both. I think he is clutch. I think he is money. I think he's a leader. I think he's smart. I think he's all those things. But I also think he's a guy that has the talent to be a game changer. And we saw that in the 2 biggest moments of the year for this team. We saw him step up in those moments and just take games over and make big plays. And he was doing it against other big-time players. I mean, look what he did against Ohio State to Caleb Downs. That wasn't an accident. That was a freaky athletic play that you just not a lot of guys can make. And there's a reason Caleb Downs doesn't get beat on plays like that, because not a lot of people can juke him in space the way that Jaden Greathouse did. And so that's why I think that Jaden Greathouse is someone who's he's on the verge of it, but he's not there yet, because just doing it in the semifinals and championship game doesn't make you a star. It makes you clutch. It doesn't make you a star. For Jaden, it's about taking that level of production and being more consistent with it throughout the course of the season. And that's what I think he's capable of that he did not do in 2023 or 24. Part of it was on him, and then another part of it was not on him. And to be a star, you can't go 5 games where your production is 1 catch for 17, 1 catch for 12, 1 for 6, 1 for 8, 2 for 6. That's what he did from Virginia to Georgia. That's not star production. But as you said, that's not all on him. A receiver can't throw himself the football. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and that's kind of that next level for him. But he has the tools to be a star player. That's why he dominated in the state of Texas at a level that few have ever done in the state's history. He's one of the, I think, top 5 all-time receivers in Texas from a production standpoint. And yeah, he's a big-time player.
Yeah, Jaden Greathouse is consistent in every sense of the word. The production now just kind of has to follow and match. But players who are that clutch aren't just that clutch because the moment dictates that. It's because they showed a level of consistency as the year has gone on. And that, to me, speaks volumes to a guy like Jaden Greathouse, but he's also a consistent leader. All the stories that I heard about him from last spring and the step up that he had last spring is monumental, especially leading into this upcoming spring. That's just a little bit over a week away. So for me, Jaden Greathouse, in the same boat as you, Bryan, definitely on the verge of becoming that breakout star. But again, it's tough to put somebody in that box of a proven star when you had, I think, that 5-game stretch of what he had. And I think he had 7 games total in 2024 with just 1 catch. 6 or 7 games with just 1 catch. So it's one of those where for him, as long as the production starts to match, it will be to the surprise of nobody that he becomes a porn star.
1, 2, 3, 4, 8 games of 1 or 0 catches, and then another game with 2. So again, there's a level of consistency from a production. That's half your season. You caught 2 or fewer passes. Yeah. That's not star production. So that's why we say he's not there yet. But what you saw, and here's the thing, Trev, sometimes we can make too much of how a guy performs in a particular game or 2. Yeah. And you can take a game or 2 where a guy, and it's what you were saying earlier. It's like you can take a game or 2 where a guy has a really good game, and you're like, hey, that guy can do that all the time. And I don't necessarily believe everybody can. Some guys just have the game of their lives. It happens. But with Jaden, however, I do believe he has the tools to do that more consistently. But it's not going to be going out and every week having 7 for 105 and 6 for 128. What I want to see more of are the 5 for 66s like he had against Florida State, more of the 4 for 61s like he had against Louisville. Those are going to be more of the normal games, and then he'll have the 3 or 4 100+ type of games.
Oh, yeah.
It's more of those where if you replace a bunch of those ones with 3 or 4, and replace some of those 2s with 5 or 6, you still only have 3 games you went over 100, but you're a big-time player. You're a difference maker. And that's the thing that to me, I think gives him a chance to be a dominant player. I mean, you look at, we were talking earlier about Brock Bowers and the kind of player he was at Georgia. Brock Bowers is a great player. Brock Bowers never had 1,000 yards receiving in a season. Brock Bowers had 1 season out of 3 with more than 7 touchdowns in a season. One year with double digits, and he did that as a freshman. You look at Brock Bowers for as good as he was in as a freshman, he had 4 games at over 100 yards. And only one of those 4 went for over 107. He had 107, 101, and 100. Right? The second year, he had 3 100-yard games his second year. That's it. And then in 2023, he had 3. Now, he missed some time that year with injury, but this isn't a guy that was going out there catching 7 balls for 120 yards every single game. And that's not what we're talking about, because they don't play in an offense where that's going to be the case. And there's too many other weapons for that to be the case. But Jaden needs to be 3 to 5 regularly, and then the occasional breakout game. That's where Jaden needs to be. And that's what he's capable of being. And if he can get to that on a regular basis, he'll be a star player because you're going to have to game plan for him. And on 3rd and 5, you're going to be like, we got to stop one. We got to stop one. We got to stop one. And then all of a sudden you hit that, that corner route to the tight end behind him because the safety's so focused on him that you run an out cut, a little flood action, deep corner over top, and boom, big play. Because you're taking advantage of the other team, knowing that, hey, one's going to get the ball here. We got to stop them. And that's kind of where I want to see Jaden. And that's what I think he's capable of being. It wasn't just a fluky game where the defense wasn't trying to guard him and he was able to take advantage. I mean, he made plays in those games in clutch moments. And I think he's capable of doing that far more regularly next season. As is Malachi Fields, who's the next guy on the list, Trev.
Yeah, the next guy that we're going to talk about here on the verge is somebody that's actually not even on campus yet. And we're talking about transfer wide receiver Malachi Fields. We've broken down a lot of his gameplay and a lot of what he brings to the table. And Notre Dame has now found themselves a solidified boundary receiver with him coming to campus, but he won't be here in the spring. But again, this is a show talking about big picture, a little bit of projection for the season of 2025. And he comes to South Bend after back-to-back 800-yard seasons at Virginia in 23 and 24. He had 5 touchdown catches in each of those years. And last year he was voted a team captain by his teammates at Virginia. And so when you bring a guy of that caliber into South Bend, it makes sense to slot him in as one of the guys that has the opportunity and has the potential to be a star for Notre Dame in 2025 for all the reasons that we talked about. Because he's a proven leader. He did it at another Power 4 program. Because he's played against a lot of the similar opponents that Notre Dame has faced and will face in 2025. Because he has the talent, the skill set, and the production that follows. It's really exciting to talk about how Notre Dame potentially going into 2025 has 2 receivers now with the addition of Malachi Fields that are on the verge of becoming stars. Something that I don't think Notre Dame's receiving corps has been able to say for a while. So next guy on this list, Bryan, wide receiver Malachi Fields. He comes over from Virginia. A lot of things to like about his potential to be a star on this offense, especially with new personnel coming in. Mike Denbrock's second year at the helm at offensive coordinator. Malachi Fields could have a big year in South Bend. And it's one that I wish I had the opportunity to watch him play in the spring up close in person.
Yeah. That's
for sure.
He's one of those guys, Trev, where for me with Malachi, it won't be about the production necessarily. I mean, he could be a 70 catch, 1,000-yard guy. I mean, he could do that, especially if they play enough games. I'm not saying he can't produce at a high level. Would you be shocked if Notre Dame gets to the national semifinals if Malachi Fields has, 70 catches for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns? I won't.
No.
I mean, if they play enough games. Now, I think he'll probably need the extra games to get there because who's the one proven star that Notre Dame has on offense? It's a running back. It's I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's still going to be a team that that runs the football, but I do think they're going to throw the ball more. There's also got to contend with Jaden Greathouse is going to get some of those catches. I think the running backs are going to get more catches next year. You're going to have Will Pauling, Jordan Faison, Micah Gilbert, potentially KK Smith, potentially Cam Williams, potentially Logan Saldate, I mean, there's a lot of guys. And then I didn't even get into Eli Raridan and Ty Washington or Jack Larson or whoever the other tight ends are. And so I just don't see a guy having sort of that monster season productive wise. He's not the burner that Will Fuller was, so he's not going to go for 65 for 1258 and so I don't see that kind of production, but could I see something from him, where if they play enough games that he could have sort of a Michael Floyd 2010 type of season? I certainly think he's capable of that in a longer season. Michael Floyd, if you remember, had 79 catches for 1,025 yards and 12 touchdowns, and he played 12 games that year. I think Malachi could do that in 15, probably fewer catches because he'd be more of a big play guy than Michael was that year. And that wasn't Michael's fault. That was more the offense. Just you weren't getting the ball down the field as much to him. He was certainly capable of being a bigger play guy. And they did a lot of those quick throws to him, things like that. But anyway, I could certainly see Malachi doing that. And that's big time production in this offense. But he could also just have 55 catches for 855 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns like he did last year. But the type of impact he's making is different. He didn't have a Jaden Greathouse, an elite Eli Raridan, and a Will Pauling, and a Jordan Faison, and a Jeremiah Love in the backfield, and a Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams in the backfield as pass catchers to take some of that away from him last year. He certainly did 2 years ago with Malik Washington, who was a incredibly heavy producer, but that was a very different offense. That was an air raid, throw the ball all over the place type of offense. But he didn't have the quarterback. I mean, the quarterback play at Virginia this past season was like not good at all. I mean, it was really bad, and still produced the same way that he did, this past season. So, that's kind of how I look at it when I talk about Malachi Fields. It's more that impact that he brings to the table, and being that guy that gives you certain elements that you don't have right now in the boundary. You didn't have that Bo Collins did a lot of good things for Notre Dame this year. He did. I mean, you can't dismiss the impact he made, whether it was the back shoulder catch against A&M, which was huge in that game, made a very strong catch against Georgia for the touchdown. I mean, he had some really good moments for Notre Dame this year. There's no doubt about it. I just think Malachi Fields just has a better talent level, just a better skill set. But Bo wasn't a guy that against good teams was going to take the top off the defense. I mean, I think the only 2 times he did it all year was against 3 times. He did it against Navy, he did it against Stanford, and he did it against Miami of Ohio. It's like the only time all year he really took the top off the defense. You had the go route against Miami of Ohio. He had the play action post against Stanford, and I think he had a go route against Navy where they didn't cover him off the line. There's a bit of a blown coverage that Riley hit him deep.
Yeah.
Everything else is kind of short to intermediate, and that's what Bo was. And Bo was good at that. And the drops were but Bo was good at that. Malachi, to me, brings some of that to the table as well. He can certainly do everything Bo could do, but he brings more of that vertical threat to the table. And that's what the offense is really lacking. And his ball skills and his ability to stretch the field and his overall talent level makes me think that if he can kind of acclimate into this offense and really kind of take his game to just a slightly higher level than it was, I think he's got a chance to be a really, really impactful player that could potentially be a 1,000-yard guy. It may not, just because, again, we just got to talk about another star player that catches the football too, in Jaden Greathouse. But that's my thing is I think those 2 guys might kind of keep each other from being like monster producers, but as a duo, they could be really dynamic as an inside-out combination for Notre Dame. And that's why I kind of have them together, is because maybe it's not just Jaden or just Malachi, but the 2 of them together could make for a really dynamic 1-2 punch in the pass game. Then they're such different players that it makes it even better in how you can attack people. And that's what I really like about this potential 1-2 punch at receiver next year, that I do think Notre Dame has potential to have star power in the pass game, not just the run game. They both have to prove it. They both have to take their game to another level, but they both have the tools to be that kind of player. And that's what excites me about the potential for this offense this season, is that you do have those 2 guys. And if just one of them steps up and becomes that kind of star player, it's a huge compliment to having a guy like Jeremiah Love. If both of them step up and become those star players, and it won't be every single game, but just on the course of the season are those type of players, how do you defend this offense when they've got Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price doing what they do, and then you've got, Jeremiah being more – again, he'll have, if next year Jeremiah Love has only 2 games of over 100 yards, just like he did this year, 7 for 105 and a touchdown, 6 for 128 and 2 touchdowns, he could still be a star player if that's really the only thing. Because what I want to see, as I said before, is if there's a bunch of 4 for 61s and a touchdown like he had against Louisville, 5 for 66 again like he had against Florida State, 3 for 43 like he had against Georgia Tech. We had another great back shoulder catch in that game. Those need to be weekly performances from him. And then you throw in the occasional 100-yard game. So that's my thing. And I'm actually going to do some math here, Trev, to kind of put into context what I'm talking about here from a guy like Jaden Greathouse. But if you give me that on the regular with Malachi, just repeating what he did the last 2 years. Greathouse giving me those type of performances combined with what Malachi Fields just has done the last couple of years, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's going to have a really dynamic unit. So I did a little bit of math here, Trev, and if you look at what Jaden did in those 5 games that I'm talking about, so it was 4 for 61 against Louisville. It was 3 for 43 against Georgia Tech. It was 5 for 66 against Florida State, plus the 2 big playoff games. If you just give me that, that kind of average over the course of a 13-game season, you're talking about a guy that has 65 catches and 1,048 yards to go 8 or 9 touchdowns. He's certainly capable of that. But even if you just throw in a couple 2 for 12s in there because somebody else is feasting, or the defense is, you're still talking about a guy that's at 50 catches for, 800 some yards, somewhere around there, and a guy that's a difference maker. And that's what I'm saying is if Bo just kind of does what he did last year and in this offense from a production standpoint, but Jaden kind of gives you that 50 for 750 and Bo does his 55 for 800 or 50 for 800, that's a dynamic 1-2 punch in this offense, because you're also going to have Jordan Faison's going to get his, and Eli Raritan's going to get his, and the backs are going to get theirs. I mean, and those numbers are more over a 12 to 13 game season. That's what I'm talking about when I'm looking at those numbers. They'll obviously add to it in the games 14 and 15 and 16. I'm just talking about like a normal 12+1 type of production level to just compare it to past seasons. Whereas this year, Jaden was at 42 for 592 in 16 games. And he should have that easily by the end of the regular season if he's doing the things that we think he's capable of. At least that by the end of the regular season. And then again, that's just that adds a lot to your offense. But if you add that and Malachi can step up and be the player we think he's capable of, that's how this offense really takes that next level and starts playing like a championship caliber unit more consistently.
I look at them very similarly to the analogy that you brought up about the Clemson corners with A.J. Terrell and Mullins, I believe was his name. Of maybe individually, one of them didn't have the star power of Jeremiah Smith, Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, but together they were an absolute insane unit together on the field. And that's how I view Jaden Greathouse and Malachi Fields a lot. There's been a lot of speculation about numbers and what stats are going to look like at the end of the year. And Notre Dame's offense this year, barring any injuries, has a lot of different mouths to feed, which is a really good issue to have when you're talking about when you're talking about a program that you expect to play 14, 15, 16 games. But some of these numbers start to get a little bit more difficult to attain. I've seen questions about, hey, will both running backs combine for 2,000 yards? And then will Malachi Fields have 1,000? Will Jaden Greathouse have 1,000? Will Eli Raritan get to 600? Will Jordan Faison get to 600? It's like, listen, guys, unless Notre Dame did 600 yards a game.
Yeah. Guys, this ain't 19 LSU. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And as fun as that would be for us to talk about, I think some of it is a healthy conversation around sharing some expectations, which is why I'm glad that you did the numbers breakdown that you did. What does a star season look like? Because people hear star season or a star player, they're like, 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns. It's like,
that's All-American.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference.
Yes.
An All-American season requires a certain level of production. We're talking about star power that results in winning games and winning championships.
Yes.
There's a difference. And that's kind of where we're getting at with this one. Is, the numbers tend to kind of have more to do with the system you played in. It's like when Josh Doxson and Corey Coleman were named All-Americans over Will Fuller. There's not a coach in the country, including the coaches at TCU and Baylor, if you could get them in a moment of honesty, if you could put like the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around them, like, yeah, I'd rather have Will Fuller. Let's be real about that. You know what I mean? Like, they'd rather have Will Fuller. But Will Fuller didn't play in the air raid offense, allowed him to catch 10, 20 extra balls and those type of things, and those guys did.
Yeah.
And so there's an element to that. In my opinion, that kind of leads to the All-American production, but we're not talking about All-American production. We're talking about being star players that are playing. And when we talk about star power, we're talking about star power. We didn't say star players per se, because we're not talking about guys that are perceived by ESPN to be the great. We're talking about impact on the game of football. And that's where we're coming from on this one. And when you look at some of the guys like last year, who were the All-American receivers last year? You had Nick Nash from San Jose State, Tedero McMillan from Arizona, Xavier Restrepo from Miami, Travis Hunter from Colorado, Harold Fannin, what I guess was considered by the football writers as a wide receiver, and then Jeremiah Smith. The only guy that I would consider, the two guys I would consider stars in there as far as like elite players, is Jeremiah Smith, Travis Hunter. I'd throw McMillan in there. But like Nick Nash is a really good college football player, but you put him in a place like Notre Dame, and I don't know that he's having the same impact. It's a very different offense. So it's not so much about are they getting All-American honors, it's are they difference makers, are they game changers, are they forcing teams to defend them a certain way? Those are the questions. That's what we're talking about. And sometimes, like Jeremiah Love was a star this year, didn't get a single All-American honor, not one, not second team, don't care. You know, he's a star. And I care more about that than I do about being an All-American. All-American is about the production. But it also doesn't mean that they can't get that level of production in some capacity. It just means it's not necessarily needed for them to impact the game the way that we're talking about. Because, again, we talk about Georgia and the year that they had Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. Has anybody seen like what Ladd McConkey's doing in the NFL? In 2022, in 15 games, Brock Bowers had 63 catches for 942 yards. Ladd McConkey had 58 catches for 762 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, Brock Bowers was an All-American that year because he had a reputation, and he was a tight end, and that's elite production for a tight end. But if Notre Dame had 2 receivers that were putting up those numbers, neither one of them are All-Americans. Neither of them are sniffing an All-American team. But what did Georgia do that year? They won the title. And that's where we're coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The next bucket that we're going to talk about here, Bryan, is the players that are capable of taking that step, which is a little different than on the verge, because obviously players that are on the verge are definitely capable. But these are guys more of we need to see a lot from them for them to get there. But they are absolutely more than capable. And the list that we came up with all kind of live really in the same position group. And we're talking about the offensive line here. And there's a couple of players that stood out to us, Bryan, when we talked through players who are capable of becoming a star in 2025. You know, you got Billy Schrouth. He's one of the more veteran players returning in terms of snaps played, games played in. You have Emil Wagner, who was your only offensive lineman that remained healthy and started all 16 games for you in 2024. And then finally, of course, I don't really think we'd be having an offensive line discussion unless we brought up Charles Jagasaw, who all of these players are more than capable of doing it. There's some things that we have to see beginning in the spring, evolving over the course of the offseason. But when we start talking about this offensive line unit, Bryan, they are really capable of breaking out into stars. And you could make the argument that the amount of star power that's been on Notre Dame's offensive line has been a little bit more inconsistent over the past couple years. You had Joe Alt in 2023. I think you could consider him a star. Before that, it's kind of more the conversation. The group itself played more like a star than having that one individual guy. But Notre Dame has some players, some key players returning on their offensive line in 2025 that could be stars. So kind of walk us through initially just, your thoughts on these 3 linemen that we're discussing.
I'm going to say something, Trevor, and I want to get your opinion on this, and then I'll get into 3 specific players. I will honor your request and your question. I do think for Notre Dame to win a title, it's easier if they have a star offensive lineman. Look, they've had teams that didn't win titles with star offensive linemen. Matter of fact, in 2017, they had 2. And at times, it stretches that year, Alex Bars played like a star. Alex Bars at times in 2017 was really good.
Oh, yeah.
And probably is an All-American in 2018 if he doesn't get hurt against Stanford. He was playing at a very high level. 2015, you had Ronnie Stanley at left tackle, Quentin Nelson at left guard, Nick Martin at center, and Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. That was really, really good.
Yeah.
Those teams were 0 on winning national title. So it's not it's not like, okay, if you have a star offensive lineman at Notre Dame, you're going to win a championship. But I do believe that in this current era that it's easier if they have that, at least one. And the reason I say that is because I feel like a star offensive lineman is a bit of a tone setter for your team, but also practically speaking, having that star player means he's dominant. And when you've got that dominant player, you get into the say. We had this question the other day. Is Notre Dame going to be more? Is Marcus Freeman going to be less aggressive on fourth down without Riley Leonard? And at first, like I said yesterday, at first I just kind of dismissed, like, well, of course he will. Then I was like, hold on a second, that's a great question. And I can't remember if it was asked of me. Was it asked of you guys last week that I saw it? And it was like, man, that's a great question because Riley was so good at finding the soft spot. But you know what can help counter that? Number one is having Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas and Keidron Young. But number two is you have that dominant offensive lineman. You're like, yeah, we're just going to run behind Charles Jagasaw, or we're just going to run behind Billy Strouth, or we're just going to run behind Quentin Nelson or Mike McGlinchey or Alex Bars or Ronnie Stanley or whoever else you view as your star player. Liam Eichenberg and Aaron Banks were a dominant left side in 2020. And by the way, Aaron Banks, Ronnie Stanley, and Robert Hainsey all just got paid this past week, by the way. So
yeah,
it's very fruitful to be an offensive lineman from Notre Dame, but especially during the Harry Hiestand era. But the point is, if you have that dominant, like, star offensive lineman, then you're going to say, okay, no, we don't have Riley Leonard, but we have Charles Jagasaw, or we have Billy Strouth, or we have Emil Wagner, or whoever steps up as that star player. I do think it makes it easier for that to happen. And if multiples do, then this team could be really scary good. And that's why I go back to what I said in the show yesterday. And I don't know if you had a chance. I know you were super busy yesterday, but I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the show that Sean and I did. But one of the things that we talked about was when you kind of look at this offensive line, there's a lot of questions like about, who plays where and who does what. But there's a ton of potential with this offensive line. And the question is, okay, but there's a lot of potential, but who's going to step up? But we also mentioned in that show, and this was the main point, was Joe Rudolph and Al Washington are the two guys that have the most could have the most impact on the 2025 season as coaches, because their units are so important to what this team is going to be. And if Joe Rudolph can get more of his players to play to their full potential, this team is going to be really, really good. And now there's a long way to go from where Charles Jagasaw, Billy Strouth, and Emil Wagner have been. And those are the three linemen that we talked about. You could throw a Anthony Knapp in there if he makes a big year two jump. You could throw a Sullivan Absher in there if he earns a starting job. Gerby Lambert's got star potential. Ashton Craig, if he was healthy, I'd say if Ashton Craig would have played 16 games this past season, maybe we're talking about him in that conversation. But these are the three right now that to me make the most sense for a host of reasons, including just their God-given ability. But if Joe Rudolph is the coach that we hope he is, Billy Strouth's going into his senior year. Emil Wagner's going into his senior year. Charles Jagasaw is going into his junior year. It's time to get them to play like stars, at least one or two of them. And if you can't get any of them to do that, then I got to question whether or not you're a good enough coach to be at a place like Notre Dame. But I'm not saying he's not going to do that. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. But they need at least one to step up and be a star. And I think there's a chance that 2 or 3 of them become that type of player. And I didn't expect any of those guys to become stars in 2024. We thought maybe Jagasaw could just because he's so talented. But then, of course, he gets hurt. And you can't blame Joe Rudolph for that. He's not responsible. Nothing. It's not like he was doing a drill that you're like, that was unsound. Coach, I don't know why you were asking guys to do that. I don't know why you're asking them to hold on here and then they'd go running around him as you're holding on. You ripped his arm. That's not what happened to him. He didn't do anything to cause him to get injured. Same with Billy Strouth. I mean, Billy Strouth missed a whole chunk of the season. Emil Wagner was a first-year starter and a redshirt sophomore. So I'm not ripping Joe Rudolph for not having those guys become stars this season. I'm saying that, hey, you built them up. Now they're stepping into that experience level, that veteran level, where now if you're the coach that we hope you are, now is when we see those guys become difference makers and impact players. And you need at least one of them, if not two of them, to really step up and be that kind of guy. I don't care which ones it is. I don't care if it's Jagasaw and Shrouth or Jagasaw and Wagner, Shrouth. It could be, it could be Craig and Knapp for all I care at center and left. You just need a couple of those guys. I think these are the three most likely. But if somebody else steps up and becomes that guy this offseason, Knapp is that at left tackle, or they move him to center and he becomes that. Sullivan Absher beats somebody out, he takes over. Gerby Lambert forces the way in the lineup. Will Black. I don't care who it is. They just need 1 to 2 of these guys minimum. But the fact that all three have the talent to do so is what has me excited about this line. And it reminds me a lot of the 2019 to 2020 jump. Now, that was more about Harry Hiestand. And for those that know, Harry had a big impact. Coach Hiestand had a big impact on that 2020 line because, Chris Watt was a G on that team, and the players went to him for a lot of things, not Jeff Quinn. That's just a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. And Coach Hiestand worked with a lot of those guys over the summer before their final years. That's just a known thing. And that had a big impact on what they had. This is a different situation. This is more about you have an offensive line coach who has developed guys into high draft picks and developed All-American offensive linemen in his past. It's now up to him to take those guys and get them to that level. And in 2019, like you saw flashes of that line, but it's kind of up and down. And then 2020, you kind of put it all together. Liam takes a big jump as a left tackle. Robert takes another big jump. Aaron Banks took a huge jump at left guard. Jarrett Patterson was a first-year starter, redshirt freshman in 2019. 2020, he had more experience under his belt. You just had a more veteran team in 2020. Tommy Kramer was healthy. When he was healthy during that season, was a good football player. You could just see it coming in 2020. Even though the inconsistency drove you a little nuts, you could see, hey, boy, if they can put it all together. And the talent of this group is even better, in my opinion, than the talent of that group. Just the God-given ability of that group. Aaron Banks and Charles Jagasaw have some similarities. Charles Jagasaw is a more talented player. Robert Hainsey and Emil Wagner have some very similarities. Robert had way more experience and technical proficiency. Emil's taller, longer, same weight, better athlete than what Robert was. Is he as tough as Robert? We'll see. Is he as fundamentally proficient as Robert? We'll see. Not yet. We'll see. But if he becomes those two things, the God-given ability is legit. You know what I mean? And Billy Shrouth is to me very similar to what Tommy Kramer was in 19. When healthy, he was a pretty good football player, but he was just really inconsistent. And then Tommy took a step in 2020 prior to the injuries taking over, and that's why that line was so dominant in 2020. I think this line has a chance to be special. It should be. It's going to be about, can you develop it? None of those guys are close to that yet, but they all are one good offseason away from getting there. Jagasaw is just about, dude, stay on the freaking field. He started 2 games, looked pretty darn good in both of those games. And he was pretty darn good coming off the bench against Penn State. I think Sean mentioned it yesterday, Trev. He was talking about how good they were in the second half. A big part of it was Emil and Charles side by side were really good. Facts. Whether you have them a left tackle, whatever, but now it's take that next step. They've got to get there, but take that next step. And if one of those 3 guys, or the more of, I'll just say this, the more of those 3 that become stars on the offensive line, the harder it's going to be for teams to stop this. Could you imagine Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price playing behind a line that's actually dominant? Not because what did we say this year? So many of those runs were just, hey, they got a body on a body. And that's all we need him to do with that backfield. Imagine what it's going to look like when Billy Shrouth starts coming off the ball and blowing the D tackle off the ball by 2-3 yards. Or Charles look what Anthony Knapp, look at the 90-yard touchdown run. Why did it work? Was it just getting a body? No, it wasn't getting a body on a body. They got a body on a body, but then Anthony Knapp drove Mikhail Kamara off the ball. And that's why the 98-yard run happened. Because Jeremiah could get a running start to the second level. There was no move he had to make. He has to make a move. Maybe it's a 6, 7, 8-yard run. You get a little bit of breathing room. But because you dominate that guy off the ball, an 8-yard run turns into a 98-yard run. And that's the difference between getting a body on a body and dominating. And so they're capable of that. Now it's just about, can they take that step and do it consistently? And the more of them that do that of that group, the more dominant they're going to be. And if you get 2 or 3 of those guys playing at a really high level consistently, oh my goodness, this offense is going to be so much fun to watch. Because you've got the skill talent, Trev. We just spent the last hour talking about the skill talent.
Yeah.
You know, imagine if this line starts playing to its. I mean, Jagasol was a top 100 player. Emil's a top 100 player. Billy was a top 100 player. You know, Gerby was a 5-star. Actually, Jagasol was a 5-star. Will Black was a 5-star. Sullivan Absher was a top 4-star guy, top 2 on my board. I'm talking about my board. I don't care what other people rank them. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. Can you turn it into proven consistent production? That's the question. And if it does, holy moly, this team is going to be really that's it's championship football right there, Trev. That's what it comes down to. That group right there playing like that.
Legitimately.
They got their butts whooped in the playoffs a lot more than they dominated. Let's be honest about that. And that's got to change next year.
When I go and I think about star power along the offensive line, for me, it's more of a fail-safe. And what I mean by that is your skilled guys, even for when they're stars, will have a game where they're just, you know, maybe the defensive game plan is such where they just get eliminated from it. We saw it from one of the best wide receivers in college football this past season. Jeremiah Smith was a non-factor against Texas. One of the big reasons why they ended up putting up 21 offensive points through 4 quarters. But you've seen it from elite teams before in the past. When I mean elite, I mean teams that have gone through and won the national championship. If there's going to be a day, no matter who the quarterback is, there might just be a game where they just don't have it that day. And that's fine. It's unrealistic to ask a player for 16 games in a season to win a national championship that they're just one of the best quarterbacks in college football week in and week out from a statistics standpoint. But when you have that star power along the offensive line, you saw it in 2023 with Michigan and Penn State. What the game dictated that day was for their offensive line to just step up and take over and pound the rock for the final 35 minutes of that game. And that's what they did. Notre Dame did it a little bit this past season against Georgia. Pass protection wasn't there. The passing game wasn't there. Riley wasn't seeing the field that great, so they just had to run the ball. But if you had a more dominant offensive line than what you had this past season in the Sugar Bowl from 2024, the 2024 season, I mean, I think Notre Dame puts up a little bit more points than just 23. That's the way that I look at it. But also, you will have a new starting quarterback under center. Having a dominant offensive line that's going to make them feel a lot more comfortable quicker than in comparison to if you're kind of still piecing things together, people are in and out of the lineup with injury. So consistency from a health standpoint and a play standpoint is going to be huge. Star power, I think, covers a lot of those bases like we were talking about.
To conclude, Trev, before we move on to the defense, we have kind of a final category of guys we're keeping an eye on. Guys that are either not in position to become stars or at least not full-time stars, but guys that have some tools to maybe be that. And there's really one guy and then one position that we're just going to briefly mention. And one is Jadarian Price. Jadarian was a really good player this year in the role he had. I still think there's another level for Jadarian to raise his game to. I think Jadarian at times last year, no, I'm getting 5 carries. So every time he touched the ball, he was looking to hit a home run. And at times that benefited him, but at times it was, hey man, just take what they're giving you. Sometimes that's going to be a 3-yard run. And that's partly, Trev, why I thought arguably his best series of the year was that 16-play drive against Indiana. Because he was the primary. Jeremiah came in for a couple plays, but he was the primary back on that. It was the drive after the 98-yard run. Because he was getting 2 when all they could get was 2. He was getting 4. He was catching checkdowns out of the backfield and picking up extra yards. Then he had that one real good run that he bounced, made a guy miss, and picked up a big play. I need more of that from him, because if he does more of that, then those big runs are going to happen. If he can do more of that, then you can more justify more 21 personnel in first and second down situations, and you can do more with Jeremiah in the backfield. And also, if Jadarian can just be a more efficient player, then you're going to see Notre Dame really not have any kind of drop-off at all in the run game when Jeremiah's off the field. And that's something that you lost nothing from an explosiveness standpoint when Jadarian was on the field. Nothing. And if anything, Jadarian had a higher home run rate than Jeremiah did. I mean, he had more big plays on a per touch basis than Jeremiah did. If he can add the efficiency to it, and that's what really separated the two of them, was Jeremiah was a far more efficient runner. He could get 3 when you needed 3, where Jadarian sometimes would try to bounce it. Now, he also had some bad luck, and this is something that people overstate how, many negative runs. I mean, like the negative run he had against Penn State. Did you watch the play? The guard went the wrong way, and 2 guys came. Again, he destroyed the DB when he did go the wrong way, but 2 guys come untouched against Penn State, you're getting tackled for a loss. It's just the reality of it. And but the point is there is a level of efficiency that I think Jadarian can get to where now you're losing nothing at running back when he's in the game as a runner. You're not going to have the pass game weapon. He's not the pass game weapon that Jeremiah is. But hey, if I need on 3rd and 2, I don't need to take Jadarian out of the game on 3rd and 2. Right now, you might, because you're like, well, he may house it, but he may go for -2 because he's trying to hit a home run. And so that's a thing where if he and now it's not that he's a star, but now you're truly just he's a star by himself. Jadarian was a star, but we're looking at saying you had a star on the field anytime you were in a base situation at running back. He's one. And then the final one is quarterback. It's probably a year too early for the quarterbacks to be in this conversation, which is why we're talking about it here. But with all due respect to Steve Angeli, who's a great kid and a lot of good things, the other 2 quarterbacks have star talent. Steve's a winner. Steve is a really good game manager, great intangibles. Love the kid, the moxie, the confidence. The difference between him and the other 2 guys, if you really want to understand truly why we favor those other 2 guys over Steve, it's the tools. They have elite tools. He doesn't. And could we see that become sort of the moments of star play as first-year starters? Maybe. But it might be a year too early for that. But if Kenny or CJ wins the starting quarterback job, you'll have a quarterback with the arm talent to look like a star at times on the field, even if it's not a consistent thing. And that's something that gets me a little bit excited. They don't need any of those quarterbacks to be stars for this offense to be great. Just need them get the ball. Like, look, you got dudes around you. Just get the ball where it's supposed to go. But if they then play that way, it adds a lot more to it. So I just at least wanted to mention them in passing before we move on to the defense.
Well, absolutely. The last thing that I'll say, the way that I look at these 2 groups between Jadarian Price and whichever quarterback earns a starting job is there will be moments in 2025 where they will have to be a star. I don't see a scenario, barring an injury, where Jadarian Price overtakes Jeremiah Love's proven star power. I don't see a situation where any one of Steve Angeli, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie get asked to come in and be like, hey, can you put the team on your back for a little bit?
Week after week after week. Right.
Yep. But there will be a moment. We've seen that out of quarterbacks before. Stetson Bennett on Georgia's run, where it's like, hey, listen, based on our supporting cast and what our defense is, how well we run the football, we don't need you to put the team on your back, but there will be a point in the postseason where that happens. It happened with J.J. McCarthy against Alabama in the Rose Bowl.
And Washington.
There will come a point where that will have to happen, where they will have to have a star moment or a star performance, but it won't have to be for 14, 15, 16 games. And that's how I view them in that group. So, Brian, that's going to do it for the offensive side of the breakdown of how we believe their star power is going to work out, who's poised to make a jump. Don't go anywhere, folks. We are getting ready to talk about the defensive side, and there's going to be some interesting conversation here because some of these players could be up for debate. But before we get there, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Whichever platform you guys watch us on, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review, whether that be on Spotify podcasts or Apple podcasts. We always enjoy getting to crank out the content for you folks. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And it's just a quick reminder, we will have a mailbag following this. So if you do have any questions, be sure to get those in. All right, Bryan, the next part of the show today is we are going to talk about defense in a similar light to how we talked about the offense, keeping with the common theme of star power. And again, we broke these out into 4 different buckets. However, we're kind of looking at the defense a little bit differently than what we did on offense. The offense had Jeremiah Love returning. We talked earlier that probably your only proven star in 2024 on the defensive side was Xavier Watts. Riley Mills was there. Unfortunately, he didn't get to finish the season. So for all 16 games, you had Xavier Watts, who's not returning to the defensive lineup in 2025. We decided to leave out the proven player bucket for the defensive side. There's players that are close. And one of the first players that we are going to talk about who are on the verge of becoming stars for this football team on defense is Leonard Moore at cornerback. Somebody that at the start of the season in 2024, if you would have told me that a kid like Leonard Moore was going to have the season that he was going to have, I don't know if I was going to be too keen to believe you. But now after getting to watch what we watched, it's a no-brainer to put him on the verge of breaking out and being a star in 2025, Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have told me that, I said, okay, who got hurt? That would have been my reaction.
Literally.
I mean, you know that I think Leonard Moore I had him as a 4.5-star upside guy coming out of high school, probably undersold it. And I've said before, at the time when he signed him, if it wasn't for him being injured almost all of his senior year, he's a top 100 guy, probably 5-star upside guy for me. It just needed to see a little bit more from him. But the tools were outstanding. You could argue he's already there, but I think he was a star for a freshman. Like, there's no debate about that. Was he a star in that you would look back and say he was one of the 4 or 5 best corners in all of college football? I don't know that I'm there for him yet. And he showed in the championship game that he belongs in this conversation now.
Oh yeah.
But I do think there's a little bit of another level of consistency and technical proficiency needed for him to truly become sort of that Benjamin Morrison level, that truly elite level cover guy that we're talking about here, where he's just like, dude, you're just shutting down half the field. Just don't even try throwing at that guy. It's just a bad idea. I expect him to be that. I mean, I just if he just does natural, normal freshman to sophomore growth, he's a star, in my opinion, because he was close. And if you were going to come in the chat and say, hey, listen, Bryan, I disagree with you. I think Leonard Moore's already a star. I'm like, okay. All right. Like, sure. I'm not going to argue with you about it because he was really, really good last year. But the point is, okay, fine. We could spend time debating whether he already is based on what he did in 2024. That's fine. But it doesn't matter because we're agreeing that he's going to be in 25. This is one where we don't think if he just repeats what he did as a freshman, he's a really good top 10 to 12 corner. That's really, really good. What we're saying is he has a chance to become one of the top 5 corners in all of college football. And that's what Jeremiah Love is. He's one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 running backs in all of college football. And Leonard Moore, to me, is going to be that in this year in college football. So it's sort of a semantic argument, whereas Jeremiah Love is in the proven category because he was already that all of 2025. There's a different level of expectation on Leonard this year also that factors into this for me, in that he didn't go into last season expecting to be the guy. There was a different level of pressure on him than there was on Benjamin Morrison in from a week-to-week basis, because you expect one guy to play an elite level. You didn't necessarily expect the other guy did. He just kind of did. He played with no pressure. Now there's all this expectation on him that you're going to be this, you're going to be that, you're going to be this other thing. So there's a level of he's got to show it to me, but I fully expect him to be that. I mean, he was outstanding as a freshman. I think he'll be even better as a sophomore, and he'll be one of the 5 best cornerbacks in all of college football. That's what I project him to be. He's more than capable of that, Trevor. And the thing that makes Leonard unique is he's kind of a combination of Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah.
Because I think he's got a lot of stickiness as a coverage guy, like Benjamin. He's a little bit more fluid than Cam was. He actually, to me, turns and runs like a smaller corner. Yeah. You don't see guys that are 6'2 plus flip their hips the way that he does. But he also has that length and that physicality that Cam had. Cam was a great run defender and screen guy. It was so funny watching Clemson trying to throw screens at Cam in 2022. It's like,
yeah.
what part of the film that you watched this last 6 weeks that makes you think throwing screens and nows and quick game at number 5 was going to work out well for you?
Yeah,
Please explain what you saw on film for me. And Leonard is that. He's a far more dominant run defender than what Benjamin was. I don't think he's quite there yet from a consistent coverage ability standpoint. And we saw a little bit of that in the postseason. There's a couple times, like Georgia got him a couple times, and Ohio State got him, like the shove off from Jeremiah Smith on that third down. Leonard, a more veteran player, will have a better idea of how to defend that. There's just some of that stuff that comes with experience. There's no way he could have had it in 2024 because he didn't have the experience. Now he's got that, though. And so it's not like, gee, I need him to be faster. He's one of the fastest players on the team, if not, you know what I mean? It's like Quinshaw Judkins just looked like he was running a 4.8 when Leonard Moore was coming up from behind him. He's got incredible length, incredible speed. He's strong for his age. He's going to have a whole year in the weight room. He didn't have spring ball last year. Leonard's going to have all spring.
I forgot about
whole year
that.
in the strength program now. So I fully expect him to be a star. So we can argue about whether he was or wasn't 2024. I don't really care. He was outstanding. We can all agree on that, but we can all agree that, yeah, he's going to be a star in 2024. Or 2025. So I'm going into the season expecting him to be a first or second team preseason All-American. And I'm expecting him to play like that. And I think he's got the talent to play like that. I think he's a smart kid, a mature kid. I think he's going to handle all the success well, knowing his family, knowing where he's from. I think he's going to be well prepared for that. And there's going to be a level of humility instilled in him that I think he'll handle it well. We got to see it, though. But I think he'll handle it well, and I fully expect Leonard Moore to be a star next year. I think this is the biggest no-brainer on the team. And as I said, if you were to say, hey, Bryan, I think he should be in the proven category, I'm like, okay, sure.
He's close. Yeah, absolutely. He's close for me. The thing that separated it from a player like Jeremiah Love is I looked at it and I said, what more could Jeremiah Love do in 2025 to be more of a better player week in and week out than what he was last season? Leonard Moore, you could make that argument of, can he take his game to the next level? I believe that he can. I'm not saying that Jeremiah Love is peaked and he's capped, but if Jeremiah Love just did what he did all of last season and remained healthy in the postseason, we're talking about, once again, him being one of the best, if not the best running back in college football, right? So with Leonard Moore, it's a little bit of, can you raise your performance from being a true freshman to a true sophomore? I absolutely believe that he can. Absolutely believe that he can. The next player on this list. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to kind of transition it because I don't think he's the only defensive back that has a chance to become a star this year. And I think Adon Schuler is another guy that I think is on the verge. Now, we're going to talk about another DB here in a minute, but I think Adon Schuler is a guy that's kind of on the cusp of becoming a star player. And for him, it's the leadership, it's the physicality, it's the playmaking ability. He just is a guy that made a lot of big plays this year and a lot of big moments. He's got that clutch gene, so to speak, at safety. But the thing about Adon is Adon made a lot of mistakes this season that you expect from a sophomore player. Not taking the right angle, at times maybe not sure. He get run over a couple times because he looked a little hesitant of like, I don't know, want to get targeted. There's just and then just being out of position a couple times, as you'd expect from a first-year player. Cleaning that stuff up alone puts him into really good, he's really good. Yeah, I fully expect Adon to be one of the 10 best safeties in college football next year. It's 10 to 12 best safeties in college football. That's borderline star territory. The question is, can he clean up things just a little bit more and really step into that difference maker, game changer category? I think Adon is more than capable of being that kind of player. Now, he's a lot. You say, well, he's not an elite athlete. Well, neither is Xavier Watts. Adon has sort of those intangibles that Xavier had that allow him to be an elite player despite not being an elite athlete. But he's still a good athlete. That's the thing about Xavier's not an elite athlete. He's not going to go run a 4.41 at the combine and jump 40 inches, or at the pro day and jump 40 inches and having an 11.5-foot broad jump and a 3.8 shuttle. I mean, he's not going to do any of those things, I don't think. I don't think he will anyway. but he was a very good athlete, but he was athletic on the field, but he was really smart and knew where to be. And Xavier getting all the experience he got this year it was going to be huge for him. So and you learned from one of the greatest ever do it, who had a style similar to yours. And I think all those things are going to benefit Adon quite a bit. And I do think he takes that jump to where he's at least in the conversation of, is he a star or not, where we're kind of debating it a little bit, which is still really good. I mean, if we're even discussing it, you're pretty flipping good. If we're even having a conversation and you're like, dude, did you seriously just tell me that guy's a star? We got to redefine what we view as a star. I said star, not starter, star. Just make sure we're on the same page, right? Oh, star. I thought you said starter. Yes, okay. He's a starter. All right. I think Adon can be a star player, an impact game changer. You always have to account where number 8 is on third down because he's just a guy that's a ball hawk. That's what I think Adon can be. And is it this year that he becomes that guy? Is it 2026 that he becomes that guy? I think it happens. The question is, does he just fully kick the door down now, or is there sort of like a crescendo where he gets to 2026 and now he's that guy? I think that's really the only question I have about Adon, assuming he stays healthy, is does it fully happen this year or does it fully happen in 2026? That's really the only question I have about Adon Shuler.
We've seen some signs from him, that's for sure, because there's no question around his ability to make big plays and big moments. The interception against Texas A&M, he had the forced fumble against Georgia. He had a pick 6 against Georgia Tech in a game that was still relatively undecided when that had happened, in my opinion. But all the signs point to yes. You know, you look at his trajectory. He's been somebody that I've talked about, that you and I have talked about quite a bit this offseason. You know, his true freshman year, he learns from Xavier Watts more from an observing perspective. Last year, 16 games of on the field learning from him. Now it's his time to take the reins. So I absolutely believe that he can and will, just a question of when. So I'm with you there. The final person on our list here on the verge of breaking out is Drake Bowen, who stepped up and started all 16 games last year for Notre Dame, played the second most snaps out of linebackers outside of Jack Kaiser. The experience that he brings to the table, we've talked a lot about his growth and his evolution from the Texas A&M game to where he was at in the national championship game. You know, we always reference the play on 3rd and 3 where he's waiting for USC to make the call at the line of scrimmage, barks out the change of the play, and then makes the play himself in front of the sticks. And so Drake Bowen for us, Bryan, is another kid that we believe can become a star in 2025 for a multitude of different reasons.
I think he's an outstanding football player. I think he was pretty good in 2024. It's kind of funny. I don't often agree with Pro Football Focus, as you very well know. I'm not a big fan of Pro Football Focus, but he's one of the guys I think they got right. I mean, his grade from Pro Football Focus, he had an 80.4 grade this past season. And that's one of the best linebacker seasons that we've seen in a while. I mean, JD was at 82.1 the year before, and we all agreed that he was very good. In 2021, was it 221? Yeah, 21. Hold on. What's the last year for 2020 was the last year for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. His PFF grade was 79.7. And when you look at just the overall production that Drake had, you know, in 2020, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah played 647 snaps. That season, he had 11 total pressures, according to PFF, and he had 29 run stops and 3 forced fumbles. And then you look at Drake this year, and you look at the production he had this season as a redshirt, basically a redshirt. I mean, as a sophomore. He was a sophomore. But Drake played 615 snaps. So that's 32 fewer snaps than Jeremiah. I know Jeremiah played fewer games, but he was on the field all the time. Played 32 fewer snaps. He had 15 pressures, including 8 hits on the quarterback. And going back to the 2020 season, I said how Jeremiah had 11 hits or 11 pressures. Only 3 resulted in hits on the quarterback. And then also Drake this year had 30 run stops, which was more than Jeremiah. Now, part of that is going to be because he plays inside where Jeremiah was on the perimeter. So that's going to factor into it a little bit. So you have to give the proper context. And then he had one forced fumble during the season. And so when I look at Drake, you say his per snap production was outstanding this past season, especially against the run. And that's what kind of has me fired up about what he's going to be, because he's only going to be better next year. And I don't need to kind of get into it again, but when you look at, well, here's one more stat category. This past year, JD in 2023 in 647 snaps had 31 total run stops. So Draco's only -1 despite playing of JD at run stops, despite playing 30 fewer snaps. So if that gives you any kind of idea of how productive he was against the run this season and just making stops in general. But he did that as a first-year starter who didn't play a ton of snaps as a freshman at linebacker. Drake got most of his action in 2023 playing special teams. He only played 74 snaps all season at linebacker. And a good chunk of those came in the bowl game. Or, the last two games. He had 47 of those came in the last two games. Stanford game and then the bowl game. So he's a kid that is, to me, just scratching the surface. And I pointed this out when we talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's a guy that you look at and say, some of those hits that he had on quarterbacks where he just laid a quarterback out, that resulted in big pass plays. In next year, with a year under his belt, some of those may result in incomplete passes. And two perfect examples, the postseason. He drilled Gunnar Stockton on that 66-yard pass to Aaron Smith. Gunnar Stockton showed some balls on that play, with all due respect, pardon the language, but that was a gut. I shouldn't say that. He showed a lot of guts on that particular play, because he saw Drake coming right at him. I mean, it wasn't a surprise hit, and he still let her go. And then you look at the 3rd and 11 against Ohio State. Drake drilled Will Howard on that play. And Will Howard also showed some guts getting that ball out. With a year under his belt, maybe Drake reads that a second faster. And that's the difference between Will Howard getting hit as he releases it and Will Howard getting hit before he releases it. One results in a 60-yard completion. One results in a fluttering pass that maybe you pick off or it falls incomplete. Yeah. It's those type of little things where Drake would hit a guy a yard past the line, where just a split second of reading that quicker because of your instincts, and all of a sudden it's a -2. It's those type of things that factor into it. And you also got to think about the fact that he played behind a bit of a mess at D-tackle this season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your D-tackles played not good football the first four games of the year. Howard Cross was never quite as dominant as he was the year before. He gets hurt against Florida State. Jason Onye's playing well, then he's gone. Gabriel Rubio doesn't start the season. He comes back. He's not full speed. And then, of course, your Riley Mills is gone after the first playoff game. So there was just always different bodies kind of working in and out because of some of the injuries. And he still went out there and played at a high level. And so I think looking into next season, I fully expect Drake Bowen to take a step forward. And I think he has a chance to become a star. I do. I think he's got all the tools. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism. Anyone that tries to tell you that Drake Bowen can't run, I got to strongly disagree with that. I just very, very strongly disagree with that comment. So I think he's a heck of a football player. I think he's going to have a really big second season, and I can't wait to see what year 2 of Drake Bowen looks like. And he's not playing baseball this offseason, so it's just football. Mm-hmm. And another guy that we think is going to be a junior captain. I'll be shocked if Drake's not a captain.
Yeah.
But he's a kid that it's not just about – he's not like Drew White and even J.D. Bertrand to a degree where it's like you're just getting everything from that kid. Just he's leaving it all out there. He's just a little limited. J.D. was a pretty athletic kid, but J.D. was just small. Drew White was a pretty athletic kid. He's just small. Drake's athletic and big and physical and powerful. That's the difference. And I can't wait to see what he does in his second year as a starter. Will he play enough snaps to be an All-American? I don't know. Don't know. Will he be a star when he's on the field? I'll be shocked if he isn't. So when we talk about star power, impact power, forget All-American list, just star power. I think Drake Bowen's going to have that in the season. So he's that guy to me that's on the verge. Like he had moments of it this past year, I think he takes a big jump next season and becomes that kind of guy.
Yeah, you talk about being a step quicker on some pressures. You can ask Tyler Shuck as well, throw his name into that category with how that feels, because Drake absolutely laid the wood on him too. I'm with you. The next category, Brian, that we're going to talk about are players that are capable of making that jump. And it's two different players. One of them lives in the secondary. The other one is along the defensive line. And the first one we're going to talk about is Boubacar Traore, who had the potential if it wasn't for the injury, because the trajectory that he was on, you and I have done the math on previous shows. If everything was all said and done and he had the same pressure rate and the same sack rate per pass rush, he absolutely would have been around that 9, 10, if all things worked out perfectly, sack range last year off the edge, which is something that Notre Dame's kind of been missing the last couple seasons. So Boubacar is the first person on this list for us. A lot of it is pending his return, how healthy he's going to be when he comes back. But assuming that everything checks out and he starts to pick up where he left off, really after the month of September, he's going to make his way into being a star for this defense. There's no doubt in my mind about it. What say you?
Yeah, and this is a category, Trevor, where it's like guys have the tools to be there, but they got a lot of work to do for different reasons. Where I think like Leonard and Adon and Drake are just kind of like, if all three of those just have normal year 2 starter progression, just Drake goes from a normal sophomore projection to normal junior improvement, just normal, what you normally see from guys in year 2 as a starter, whether it's from sophomore to junior in the case of Drake or Adon, or freshman to sophomore for Leonard. If they just make normal increments, nothing like no big jump, just normal, to me, they're on that level. These are guys that aren't quite there yet, that need to make bigger jumps and have a longer way to go, but the tools are there for them to be there. And Boubacar is certainly that guy. He's just not proven. He's a lot like, he is the Charles Jagasaw of the offense or of the defense, where he hasn't played a lot of football, but when he has played, you're like, that's some specialness right there. Like you just look at his burst off the line, you're just like, nobody else on the defense has that. Matter of fact, nobody else in the other team's defense is doing that either. I mean, he literally played 1 snap against USC and got a sack in 2023. And we've already talked about this. His rate of production this past year was really outstanding for Notre Dame. I mean, when you just look at what he was starting to become and the way he was starting to play, he was on the verge of becoming a really special player for Notre Dame. And you're talking about a guy that had 9 pressures basically in the first 4 games of the season and didn't play a whole lot of football. I mean, a whole lot of snaps. I mean, he played a lot against Miami of Ohio, but he was at 34 against A&M, had 2 pressures. He played 20 snaps against Northern Illinois, had 2 pressure and 2 stops. Played 23 snaps against Purdue, had 2 pressures, a stop, and a pick 6. Played 45 snaps against Miami, Ohio, most snaps he played, and he had 4 pressures and 4 stops. I mean, so doubled his snaps, doubled his production. And so, you know, we've kind of talked about this. You take him and what he did the first 4 games before he got injured, and you say if he's healthy all year and plays all 46 games, he's got 36 pressures, which is a pretty good number when you talk about a guy averaging around 30 snaps a game. You know, but if you then go look at sort of his hit rate and, you know, hitting the quarterback and all this, he'd have had 20 hits on the quarterback. So like he had 9 pressures, but 5 of them resulted in either a sack or a hit on the quarterback. So when he got pressure, he was getting to the quarterback. Much higher success rate in that regard. And that's assuming his production doesn't get any better. And he would have had also over 30 stops, you know, run stops, which are, you know, wins for the defense is how Pro Football Focus defines it. 30-plus pressures and 30-plus run stops for a guy averaging about 30 snaps a game is a high level of per snap production. Very high level. But it's not just the production, it's the raw tools behind it. We've talked about this a lot. You know, like him and Boubacar ranked very low on Ryan and I's recruiting boards coming out of high school for what they were at the moment. But they were 1 and 2 in upside, and they had both elite upside. And Boubacar, to me, was at the top just because the tools were there. But here was the concern. He was banged up as a senior in high school. He was banged up last year, different injuries. He's got to prove he can stay healthy, much like Charles Jagasaw has to prove he can stay healthy. If he's healthy and 100% healthy, meaning not just it's healed but healthy in regard to the explosiveness is back, the athleticism is back, then I think he has a chance to become a star player and be that kind of edge rushing presence that Notre Dame severely lacked for most of last season. And there were some games here and there where the edge player stepped up. Georgia being one is a pretty big game, but you would have loved to have had a guy like a healthy Boubacar in the semifinals. You would have loved to have a guy like him in the championship game. And I think Boubacar can be that. That's the one thing that's been missing from the Notre Dame defense the last few years is just – and Javonte Jean-Baptiste was a good football player in 2023, no doubt, but he wasn't a star. This kid has a chance to be a star. He's just got to be healthy, and he's got to continue improving his game, and he's got to become a better all-around player. Boubacar was a really good pass rusher last year, but it wasn't until like that last game against Miami how he started to show me some chops as a run defender. That's an area he's going to have to get a lot better at. But at the very least, he can bring star talent and star production as a pass rusher. But I think in time, Boubacar's got a shot to be that kind of star player all around. The tools are there. It's just got to get there. The experience just isn't there. And that's my question mark about him is can he stay healthy and does he have enough seasoning to be that kind of player? But, I mean, I saw what he did in the first 4 games of the season last year, and that was for a kid who had played 27 snaps the year before. You know what I mean? So it's like, that guy gets after it. And again, he had 1 total pressure in 2023, only playing 27 snaps, but it was a sack. So, I mean, he's had 10 total pressures in his career, and 6 of them resulted in getting hits on the quarterback. I mean, that's a pretty darn good success rate. You know, It's a pretty darn good success rate. I mean, you give me a guy that's hitting the quarterback. Like, okay, perfect example, Mikael Williams, really good football player this year for Georgia, right? 26 pressures this year, 11 of them resulted in hits on the quarterback. 26 pressures the year before, 9 of them resulted on hits on the quarterback. The year before that, 33 pressures, 8 resulted in hits on the quarterback. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a good success rate. But you're talking about a kid in Boubacar Trevor that's over 50%. I mean, here's another example. Abdul Carter last year, 66 pressures on the quarterback. 23 of them resulted in hits on the quarterback. That's a really good success rate. Like, that's really good. That's a 34.8% clip of when you do pressure, you're resulting in a hit on the quarterback. It's an outstanding rate.
Yeah.
Boubacar's over 60 or at 60. Very small sample size. If you expand that, and I don't even really count that because that one against USC was on a end of the half type of play. He's at 55.6 on last year. As he plays more snaps, that number will naturally go down. And you'll see more pressures, but maybe the hit rate stays similar on a per snap basis, but he gets more pressures on a per snap basis that don't result in hits. You see what I'm saying? But those are crazy numbers. And in a very small sample size. If he can be anything close to that and be healthy, he could end up being arguably your best defensive player. Long way to go, but that's just the natural tools that Boubacar has. Well, I mean, he has at least a chance to be your most impactful defensive player.
Sure.
Maybe not your best, but your most impactful. I think that's more of what I mean is most impactful, not necessarily like your best overall player, but your most impactful one. Most disruptive. Maybe that's a better term.
Yeah. I mean, the Charles Jagasaw comp was really good in terms of the limited snaps that we've seen him in, but the flashes that have gone on during those snaps is huge. Another player that we're going to talk about here that's almost on the flip side of that coin, somebody that we saw play a lot of snaps in 2024, and that's Christian Gray. And he's the other corner for us, the other member of the secondary that is capable of becoming a star in 2025. Kind of walk us through, Brian. Like, I want you
to talk about Christian because I've talked a lot about him. I'm curious to hear what you think about him. I've made it very clear what I think about Christian. At times this year, he was their best corner. Consistency is a big thing for him, and he's going to have to get stronger. And I think he's more than capable of being a star. The God-given tools are there, and he flashed it each of the last 2 years. I've made it very clear. I think Christian Gray is going to be a big-time player for Notre Dame this year. I want to know what you think, because I mean, I've had takes that I'm kind of standing on an island, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. I'm curious what you think about the kind of Christian Gray, because he was a guy that I added to this list. Didn't even ask for your opinion on it when we were show prepping. I want to hear what you think about where Christian Gray needs to, A, does he have the ability to be a star player? And B, is it this year? Is it next year? What are your thoughts on him? I've made mine very clear all year.
Yeah.
I want to hear yours.
Yeah, Christian Gray for me is a player that lives in between the capable and on the verge. If I'm being 100% honest, that's where he falls for me. I wouldn't quite put him up on the stage of Leonard Moore, Don Schuler, and Drake Bowen as solidified on the verge of becoming a breakout player, because the way that I look at it is players on the verge, we're going to find out pretty quickly over the course of 2025. Like I said, the first 3-4 games, call it, if they kind of become a proven star or not. Christian Gray for me is somebody who I think people forget very quickly was talked about as being a better corner at one point last season than what Ben Morrison was. Many were claiming until the injury, unfortunately. And that set him back a little bit. But here's the difference. There are some players that get injured, they come back and they're not physically the same. To use it just as an example, because I appreciate what he did for Notre Dame's defense last season. Howard Cross battled some injuries early in the season with, the hamstring, and then he got banged up at the end of the year, came back, was never really the same. Christian Gray came back and the ceiling was still just as high. Christian Gray last year the highs were still very, very high. And I think the microcosm of his 2024 season came against USC. He had a big stop on 4th down on their opening drive. He had the pick 6. I think according to Pro Football Focus, in that game alone, he was still credited with 2 or 3 pass breakups, but then he also allowed 7 catches for 130 some odd yards and 2 touchdowns.
2 breakups, 1 pick.
Okay.
And then a tackle for loss.
So you go through and you look at what Christian Gray did last year, and that's why I say that he's on the verge of he's in the middle of being an on the verge player and a player that's capable, because his margin for error is still a little bit wider than what a Don's Leonard Moore's is or what Drake Bowen's is. Drake Bowen's miss is, he might not have covered the back correctly out of the backfield, or he was a step too late in getting to a quarterback that just results in a hit, not a sack. Leonard Moore's miss, you ran through some of those. Don Schuler's miss is a little hesitant, led the team in missed tackles. He had 18. Christian Gray's misses were a little bit more evident in what we saw. Some of that in the national championship game was based on the position that he was put in. I don't think off man is not his strong suit. And unfortunately, that's what he was asked to do against Jeremiah Smith on that 3rd and 11.
And also, just in general, I'm making somebody other than Jeremiah Smith beat me on 3rd and 11. He's not going to be an option. I'm going to make sure that he's double covered on that play. I know that's not normally what you do, but in that situation, Xavier Watts is over top of him, or Don Schuler. If you want Xavier to be covering somebody else, you don't allow him to beat you on 3rd and 11. That's just 100%. That was my issue with that particular play.
Absolutely. But that's where I fall on with Christian Gray is I wouldn't quite put him on the same level as where Boubacar is. I agree that Boubacar is on the verge. It's such a limited sample size from him. We've gotten to see a really big sample size from Christian Gray. I can't quite put him where Boubacar is. Absolutely. A lot of good snaps. But for some of his other disparaging snaps, that's why I can't fully put him as an on the verge guy. Because a lot of the questions that I have about Christian Gray for me probably won't get answered in the first 3-4 games. It will be over the course of the season. But
the only thing I'll disagree with you on is that right there, just because of who they play the first 2 games.
That's
I think
fair.
And my thing is, Trev, because I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. For Christian, it's like, dude, you got to trust the technique more. You got to stop. Somebody in the chat said he likes to gamble a lot. He does. You got to be more fundamentally sound. You got to get stronger. We're going to know against Miami and A&M if that's happened. Because, I don't know who else tests him the way that those 2 teams will the rest of the year, looking at the schedule.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'd push back on. But everything else I do agree on. Just because if he doesn't play well in those 2 games, but he dominates the rest of the year, I don't We'll see.
No,
But anyway,
absolutely.
those are good. Those are good. That's good insight. I would actually say I think he's closer to being a star than Boubacar just because he's played more. And because he's played more, like I'll put it like this: who was better through the first 4 games when they were both healthy, Boubacar or Christian? I'd argue Christian. Yeah. I think Boubacar was more disruptive. Christian was the better player. Mm-hmm. And then after that, they both had some injuries, and Christian became a little bit more of this. But I get your point. The only thing I would push back on is I just flip those 2 things. I think your overall point is spot on, and I appreciate you sharing that because I just wanted to hear from somebody else. Like I know Sean and I are on the same page on Christian. I just wanted to hear somebody else's view of where he is. I just, again, consistency, play within the structure of the defense more. That's what made Benjamin Morrison so great, is he just played within the structure of the defense. I think Christian also learned a very bad habit from Benjamin in that he's very grabby. Yeah. Benjamin could get away with it. Christian can't because Benjamin was so otherwise technically sound that you didn't see it. Like we could see it on TV, but the refs couldn't see it. And that's something that got Christian in trouble because Christian didn't know how to play that way. But he doesn't have to do that because he's a lot faster than Benjamin. And that's the thing is trust your technique, trust your coaching, and stop gambling so much. Know when to make that big play and know when to just cover. And those are the things. And of course, like I said, strength is going to be a big thing for him. But I do believe that Christian is going to surprise a lot of Notre Dame fans who are down on him this year. And I understand it because, you know, with corners, a lot of times you only know what happens when they're thrown at. And for Christian this year, a lot of times when he actually got thrown at, that he would give up plays. What you didn't see was a lot of those plays where he's just locking dudes down. You know, and that consistency is the thing that's going to have to change for him. He's going to have to become a much more consistent player.
And that's the life of a corner, unfortunately. Inconsistencies at corner lead to games like the USC game. You know what I mean? Whereas inconsistencies along the D-line aren't as glaring to somebody who is not as immersed, like just watching it like the casual fan, or I mean, even some a little bit higher than a casual fan, they're just watching the game. They're not going to notice a D-end not setting the edge initially. Right. They're going to notice a corner getting beat on a route.
Right.
And
they're not going to know that it was the one technique that hit the wrong gap, not the middle line. But you know that, yeah, exactly. Here's the crazy thing about Christian. Like the playoffs showed, like Christian is super talented. The playoffs in the USC game showed how far he has to go from a technical standpoint. Because there's 3 worst games of the year were USC and then 2 playoff games where he gave up some big plays. And he's going to have to improve in those areas. No question about that. But prior to that game, prior to USC, Christian had allowed 29, 2, 3, 27, 17, 16, 18, 0, 42, and 0 yards in games prior to USC. That's it. The 42 yards, by the way, was because he gave up a 38-yard gain to Malachi Fields, who now plays for Notre Dame.
There we go.
Prior to that, Malachi caught a pass for 38 yards on Christian. Prior to that, the most yards he had allowed in the game was 29. And he only allowed other than the UVA game, prior to USC, he'd only allowed more than 17 yards in the game twice, 27 to Miami, Ohio, and 29 to Texas A&M. And those 29 yards against A&M came on 4 catches. They were all quick hitches in an uncovered zone. And then, of course, he had a huge breakup at the end of the game. So that's the thing is, like, the talent's there. But in the playoffs, when you're playing against other big-time athletes like Arian Smith and against USC, when you're going against, Mekhi Lemon and you're going against the Hudson kid, Kyrie Hudson, and you're going against Deuce Robinson, you make those technical mistakes. You're not so much more dominant athletically compared to them as you are guys at Georgia Tech, guys at Stanford, guys at Florida State, guys at Army, Navy, even A&M, who had big receivers but not real fast receivers. That's what hurt him in the playoff. And I think that's going to be a great lesson for him is like, dude, you're that good when you want to be, when you're focused. He's just going to have to prove that he can be that kind of guy. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of player he's going to become this year. And then the last guy, the last category, Trev, that we've talked about is guys that are there. There's some tools there, but there's a long way to go. And I think one of them is in this category because we don't know who it's going to be, but who emerges as that number 2 linebacker this year? Not necessarily starter, but who's that guy that is this year's Drake Bowen? Because I think Drake Bowen is going to become Jack Kaiser. He's going to dominate the snaps at linebacker. Who's that guy that becomes the next Drake Bowen? That, yes, they're a 4 or 5 man rotation, but there's 2 that like are the top of the board guys. Is it Kingston? Is it Jaden Ausberry? And who, by the way, tied for second on the team in tackles despite starting 0 games this year, right? Pretty impressive player. Is it Jalen Sneed? Or do they all 3 play so much together that none of them kind of becomes that star player? And that's why I think they're in this category, because they all 3 have the tools to become a star player, especially Kingston and Jaden Ausberry. The question is, the thing that could keep them from becoming that is none of them play quite enough to be stars. They're all really good as a unit. Or is it where just that position gives you star production? It's just not always the same guy. And that's where this one is kind of an interesting category, because it could be the will linebacker spot gives you star play. It just is coming from 2 to 3 different guys as opposed to 1 at Mike linebacker. That's going to be very fascinating to see.
I look at the linebacker rotation the same way that I look at the running back rotation. The running back room, you have your Jeremiah Love. In the linebacker room, you have Drake Bowen. But behind them are still very, very talented individuals that all flashed last year. Even a kid like Kedron Young, who it was limited minutes, but when he was on the field, nobody wanted anything to do with him. In the linebacking room, you have Jaden Ausberry, to your point, finished second on the team in tackles for a loss, didn't start a single game. You have Jalen Sneed, who started to round out his game towards the end of the year to where he moved away from just being a situational linebacker. He started against Georgia, Penn State, and Ohio State, and it wasn't as an edge rusher. But Pro Football Focus credited him with 3 consecutive starts in the 3 biggest games that Notre Dame played this last season. And then you have a kid like Kingston Viliamaasa, who arguably out of the 4 might have the highest ceiling out of the 4 once his career is all said and done at Notre Dame. Who is it? And I think it's just kind of similar to the conversation that we had around Jadarian Price. Of if he can hone in on some certain things, improve his game, learn to take your lumps where you can, but also still be the home run threat that you have, there's not going to be as much of a drop-off of when they rotate in, and that's how I view whoever steps in at that will linebacker spot. I think Notre Dame's linebacking core is poised to be in a spot where there's no drop-off in production, whether it is one of those 3 guys that we just mentioned. I firmly believe that. The last guy on the list that we're going to talk about here, Brian, is Bryce Young. And this is another kid that flashed a lot of potential in 2024, but has a ways to go before he steps up into that star status that we've seen other Notre Dame defensive ends have. But
man, the flashes were impressive. It's how much of a leap can he make technically in year 2? That's the big question for me. And that's the only thing holding him back is I'm kind of looking at Bryce as being a 26 breakout star, right? That like he'll break out and be a star barring good health. It's just, is it going to be this year or will it be next year? So my thing on him is he has all the tools you want. 6'7", he'll be 260 next year. Twitchy, athletic, explosive, powerful. His overall game, he has the potential to be an all-around dominant lineman, not just a pass. And if anything, he may be eventually be a more dominant run defender even than he is a pass rusher at some point in time in his career. The tools are all there. It's going to happen. It's just, will it happen this year? Will it be early? Will it be late? Will it be 26? That's my only question. And it's one of those ones where I'm torn, Trevor, because I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him because I don't know if he's going to be quite ready for that yet. And so I don't want to start saying, oh, he's going to be a star. He's going to be a star. He's going to be a star. And then he's not a star. He's a good player, but not a star this year. And then it's like, well, maybe he's overrated. No, it's going to happen in time. So it's like, it may happen this year. And if it does, I won't be shocked at all. But I'm not quite ready to fully put on that burden on him just yet. And the good thing for Notre Dame is they don't need him to be that full-time star player yet. He can still be, because you have Josh Burnham, you have Bryce, you'll have Jordan Patelho, you'll have Boubacar, you'll have Junior Chilamaki, you'll have Logan Thomas, who I thought about putting on this category, but we decided he's probably still a year away from that being potentially in that conversation. But I think Bryce is going to be a flashy player this year, that the flash will still be there, but the production's going to take a jump, but not quite star production. He'll have about 3 or 4 games. You're like, dude's going to be a star next year. Look at how he played in this particular game. Almost kind of like what we saw from Jaden Greathouse this year, where the overall production wasn't star caliber, but there's about 3 or 4 games you're like, he's going to be so good. And I think Bryce is going to kind of be that way as a sophomore. And he's almost kind of like how Drake Bowen was, and as a sophomore, how Don Schuler was as a sophomore, how Christian Gray was as a sophomore. They were all flashy as sophomores, but now we're projecting to be stars as juniors. I feel the same way about Bryce. But if he becomes a star this year, Trevor, you will not hear me saying, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. I had no idea he's got the tools. I'm just want to pump the brakes a little bit on predicting it this year. I think it'll still be some flashes this year, and then next year he becomes that true star player.
We talked about this when I was on with Sean Davis last week, and we talked a lot about just comparisons. And I'm not talking comparisons from a physique standpoint, but just more career trajectory. And the analogy that I drew was back to what Isaiah Foskey did early in his time at Notre Dame. As a true freshman in 2019, Isaiah Foskey only recorded defensive statistics in 3 games in 2019, no sacks. Bryce last year, he compiled stats over 12 games defensively, not on special teams, and he recorded 1.5 sacks. In 2020, in his sophomore year, Isaiah Foskey he went from 0 sacks to 4.5 on the season. Until shown otherwise, and I'm not saying this is a knock on Bryce, it's just to your point about not putting that burden on him. I'm not expecting him to have the Isaiah Foskey 21 or 22 season next year for Bryce. If it happens, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. But I draw analogies to Foskey's career trajectory as of right now for Bryce. I think Bryce could end up having a little bit higher of a ceiling, given some of the twitchiness. That's when the physique comes in. Foskey, he was, 6'5". Bryce Young is 6'7". They already weigh the same, and so I think his ceiling could potentially be higher. But as of right now, my expectation for him is to have a similar leap of what Isaiah Foskey had from his true freshman year to his sophomore year, technically redshirt freshman year in 2020, more so than what Foskey did from his redshirt freshman year to his redshirt sophomore year, where he went from 4.5 sacks to 11. That's kind of where I see Bryce Young fitting into that conversation. But if he does make that jump and is a 9, maybe double-digit sack guy over the course of more games, because the thing you have to look at with Isaiah Foskey with a little bit of an asterisk, they only played, 10 regular season games in 2020, and he had 4.5 sacks. Then they only played in 1 postseason game. Bryce Young is just going to have minimum 1 more regular. Two.
Because the ACC championship game, yeah.
That's right. Gosh, I forgot Notre Dame was in a conference for that year.
You forgot that Notre Dame's played as many ACC title games as Miami's played in? You forgot that? Yeah.
Oh, man.
Just had to say that. Sorry.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for the
one thing that he will be a star on. He's going to block 3 kicks. He's going to block 3 kicks this year. Again, I think right?
Yeah.
Did he block 3 this year?
Yeah. Yep. Sure did.
I love Michael Parks. I can't bring it up, but I love Michael Parks' comment on
about the punters.
That was great.
Yeah,
that was great.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good. Well, folks, that's going to do it for the defensive portion of our show, where we're talking about star power. But don't go anywhere. We do still have a mailbag coming up. But before we get there, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Best way to support what we do here, as always, is subscribe to the premium message boards. Go visit the Champions Lounge. A lot of the conversations that we're having today are currently ongoing on the message boards, and everything's about to ramp up even more because spring training is right around the corner. We're going to have a lot of practice intel pieces coming out, things that we see while we're up there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a lot of fun. You can find all of that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, we got a mailbag, and we have some pretty good submissions in here. We've seen them. We've started to star some aside. For you guys that are aware, if this is by chance your first ever mailbag, the way to submit a question, you put a mailbox emoji, or you can put MB for mailbag. We're going to go for about an hour, and we're going to cycle through as many questions as we can. But I saw that we have some good ones in here to get us started here, Brian. Also, super chats will get bumped to the top if you want your question answered right away. Justin Kane, what do you think about blue chip ratio predicting wins and championships?
I mean, look, you need good players to win, right? But the flaw in this has always been that people look at, okay, your blue chip ratio is X percent, so that means that you're winning. But what they don't take into account is not every team is playing a 4-star at that position. So I pointed this out, like Ohio State in 2015 team had a couple 5-stars that never hardly ever played, or like a guy like Curtis Grant, who was a 5-star, who played like he was a solid player. But Darian Lee, who was a 3-star, was their stud linebacker that year, and Josh Perry, who was not even who was a 4-star but not a top 100 guy, was a better player than him too. So you listen, 5 stars. I'm like, well, yeah, he was a 5-star, but did he play like a 5-star? And I just don't think that that's necessarily something that I think it's important from the standpoint of, yes, you need it, but it's not as impactful as people make it out to be. I mean, I'll just look at the one for CBS Sports that Bud Elliott did, right? So Ohio State was 90%. Yeah, they were pretty good. Alabama was at 88%. They lost 4 games last year. Georgia was at 80%. Notre Dame was at 67%. Did it look like a 13% difference in talent between Notre Dame and Georgia this year? No, it didn't. Notre Dame was the more talented team, but they had some guys that weren't ranked as high. Texas A&M was number 4 at 79. They looked like they had a 12% more talented team than Notre Dame. Oklahoma was ahead of Texas, 73-72. Does anyone want to argue with me that they have one of those higher rates? No, they don't. You've got Florida in the top 15, Miami in the top 15. Miami and Penn State are on the same level. Does anyone want to sit here and try to convince me that Miami has a more talented team than Penn State? No. Some of these schools have inflated rates because of where they come from, where they're recruiting primarily from. Other schools have an inflated rate because of the fact that when a kid commits to the school, they tend to get a bump. And so you need to recruit talented players to win. Sometimes that reflects in a really high blue chip ratio. Sometimes it does not. And you talk about, like, this past season as an example, the teams that played in the national championship ranked first, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, ninth in blue chip ratio. First and ninth. The semifinal teams ranked first, 7th, 9th, 10th, and 13th in blue chip ratio. So what happened to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, 12? You know what I mean? Like, Texas and Clemson, were both top 15 teams. They were both in the playoff. Clemson was 1% higher than Florida. Notre Dame was closer in blue chip ratio to Florida than they were to Oklahoma. Does anyone believe that that's actually true? If you do, I got some what is it, an igloo to sell you here in Miami, Florida. So it's important to have talented players. I think people make too much out of the blue chip ratio from the standpoint of, I think that is more used to sell the need for recruiting services more than anything else. Right? That's what it comes down to. We've got to justify people paying to care what we have to say about recruits. So we'll create this blue chip ratio thing and all. And as I said, there's value to using it as a tool to gauge certain things. But for every Ohio State at 90%, I'll show you a team like A&M who's 4th in blue chip ratio, and a team like Oklahoma who's 6th, and say, I think they got that wrong. Pretty wrong. And I'll show you Notre Dame. Like, I'm sorry, that 67% for Notre Dame is bullcrap, because their star. Think about what we talked about the star power. Talk about Jeremiah Love. The two guys that we say are the closest to being stars for Notre Dame right now. Jeremiah Love, his ranking reflected what he's become. He's a top 100 recruit. He's playing like top 100 recruit. Leonard Moore's a 3-star. Right? So you're going to get stars in different ways. And defensive end, Boubacar Traore. Nobody had him in the top 200, I don't believe. And then you look at Bryce Young, and he was, with the exception of ESPN, who's pretty much worthless when it comes to recruiting rankings, if we're being completely honest. They had him as outside the top 100, but everybody else had him as a top 100 player. So guys are going to come in different packages. They just are, and they're going to come in different rankings. What matters is you need star players. This whole show is about star players. And the blue chip ratio is a gauge to evaluate the potential that a team may have. But it's far from perfect. But no team is going to recruit nothing but, like, this is my whole argument. People will say, well, look at the success rate. Like, guys, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at Jeremiah Smith coming out of high school and say, he's going to be really good. I respect the guy that saw Will Fuller coming out of high school and said, he's going to be really good. I had a buddy of mine who swore up and down that Will Fuller was going to be a stud at Notre Dame. Now, I had watched a little bit of Will Fuller, but I was coaching at that time, Trev, so I wasn't like really able to dive into the film. I was more of like a fan. I had my own recruiting to do, so I didn't have a chance to like spend hours upon hours of looking at the film. But he's like, dude, he's going to be a star. I was like, all right, man, I believe you. You know, I like some of the film, and I actually liked Will Fuller's DB film a lot. He was a pretty good corner in high school. But that's the impressive guy, is that guy. The impressive guy is the guy that looked at Pat Mahomes coming out of high school and said, that guy's a really good player. You didn't need to be a genius, or you didn't need to get paid a salary at 247 Sports to watch Trevor Lawrence in high school and say that guy's really good. Right? You needed to be a pretty good analyst to look at Patrick Mahomes and say that guy's going to be pretty good. Because for every stud high school kid, highly ranked high school kid that becomes a great NFL player, like a guy like Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick, Peyton Manning. I mean, there's been plenty of them, but there's also a lot of Josh Allen's. What was he, a 2-star? Pat Mahomes, 3-star. What was Aaron Rodgers' rank coming to high school? I think it's probably a little bit before that time, but like he went to JUCO because he didn't have great offers coming out. He probably wasn't going to be ranked real high. There's a lot of those guys too. That's what you need to do, is find the big-time players. Right? I mean, like Quentin Nelson was a 5-star by Rivals. ESPN didn't have him as a top 100 player. Who got it right? I have no idea. But you look at some guys that Notre Dame got that were big-time recruits, and they turned out to be big-time players. Other guys, Ronnie Stanley, nobody had as a top 100 recruit. Mike McGlinchey, nobody has a top 100 recruit. Liam Eichenberg, nobody had as a top 100 recruit. Joe Alt, nobody has a top 100 recruit. Blake Fisher was a top 100 recruit. Played like it at times. And if he'd have come back as a senior, he definitely would have played like it, but he was a top 50 draft pick. So, yeah, of course you expect him to do it, but Joe Alt was a 3-star by some, a borderline top 200 by others, and he becomes a top 5 overall draft pick. So, but what mattered about Joe Alt? Was his star ranking, or was it the talent? And this is what I've always said. You don't slap a star ranking on a guy and it creates his talent level. This isn't like NCAA back in the day where you could get up and just move a guy up to 99, because you wanted to make him a 5-star. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's a tool that you use to rank players and give some gauge on who they are. That's why I use them. If I thought it was total garbage, I wouldn't use them on my rankings, and I do. But the reason that I created the upside ranking is because every player's different. Some guys are just ready to be studs right now. Jeremiah Smith, you just knew he's going to be a star day one. There may be some other guys that end up becoming stars who don't become stars till year 2 or year 3. That doesn't mean they aren't stars. It just means they needed a little bit more time. And so there's the star talent is what matters, not the star ranking. Because, well, 5 stars hit at a higher rate. Okay, great. But what if all you get is the guys that don't hit? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, and I've also pointed this out for years, especially 247, but Rivals has done this a lot as well. And Rivals used to do this even more. The new crew's a little bit different. But I've pointed out dozens of examples of a kid who's ranked as a 3-star or a top 250 guy that commits to Georgia, Bama, or House, and the very next ranking just skyrockets up the rankings. And they're like, Well, that's evident that the star rank. No, it's not evident the star ranking matters. What's evident is that they were smart enough to know that Nick Saban knows how to evaluate talent. Had he committed to Kentucky, would his ranking have gone up the same? No, it wouldn't have. That's the point. So you didn't actually evaluate that guy properly. You were just smart enough to know that if Bama likes a guy, it's a good chance he's a probably good football player. If Georgia likes a guy, if Ohio State likes a guy, there's a pretty good – if Ohio State likes a receiver, you probably should raise his ranking because they're pretty good track record there. And that's kind of where I'm coming from is like I kept telling people, like, guys, I don't care what you think about Benjamin Morrison in the star rank. This kid can play. He was a 3-star when he committed. But who'd they beat for him? Nick Saban and Jimmy Lake. That's what I tried to point to. Like, I don't care what a star ranking says. The film tells me he's a stud, and the fact that Nick Saban and Jimmy Lake both wanted him bad tells me he's a stud. And Mike Mickens wanted him, of course. And I remember talking to Mike Mickens about Leonard Moore, and he's like, you could just tell that they think this kid's going to be a stud.
Yeah.
Didn't matter they didn't care what the rankings were. Name me a 5-star cornerback you'd trade in the 2024 class right now for Leonard Moore. It's going to help your blue chip ratio, but name me a 5-star corner that you'd want to trade for Leonard Moore right now. The answer is there isn't one. So what do I care about more? A ranking or talent? And that's always been my point. But you're not going to go out there and recruit nothing but 3 stars and win a championship. Why? Because there is some validity to the success rate of certain guys. When you recruit more of the boomer bust guys, and we've said this a bunch, Trev, the more boomer bust guys, low floor, high ceiling recruits guys you have, the less likely that you're going to have enough stars to be a championship contender. You need a lot more high floor guys to balance out some of the low floor, high ceiling guys. And that's the key. And so it's a tool. It's not the tool. That's always been my issue because star rankings don't matter. What do you mean by that? I can give you this. They don't matter because they don't define a player. They don't determine your talent level. Your talent level determines the star ranking, and the star ranking is determined by the talent of the evaluator to recognize another player's ability. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they got it right, even though it looks like they got it wrong. Nobody should have had Joe Walt as a top 100 recruit coming out of high school because he wasn't that at the time. That's why I gave him a 4.5-star upside grade, though, because you could see the potential was there, even though he wasn't there now. And that's what I try to tell people is just because you're a 5-star doesn't mean you're good. It just means people think you're going to be good. Just because you're a 3-star doesn't mean you're going to be a 3-star as a college player. It just means that's how people evaluate you as such. And that's all I've ever said. You need talent. Sometimes it's in the form of a 5-star. Sometimes it's in the form of a 3-star. And a couple times in college football, it turns out to be a 2-star. And that's what matters. So the blue chip ratio is fine, but they never give you the context of what's the blue chip ratio of the starting lineup. What's the blue chip ratio of the best players? That's a different conversation than what your blue chip ratio is. So that's kind of where I kind of look at it, Trev, is like, you know, that tell me that more than the other way around. Tyler Warren was a 3-star player coming out of high school, according to Rivals. Would anybody want to tell me that he was a 3-star player in college? Does that mean the recruiting services all got it wrong? Or maybe, here's a crazy thought, guys develop at different stages. And maybe he was a 3-star in high school, but the tools were always there for him to eventually become a star. Do you really think Penn State recruited Tyler Warren thinking this is a 3-star talent? Or maybe they saw something that this kid's got some tools. Maybe he doesn't pan out. Maybe he does, but the tools are impressive. Let's take a chance on this kid and coach him up. You know that's exactly why they went after him. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you don't. That's why you can't only recruit Tyler Warren. That's why sometimes you need to also recruit a Nicholas Singleton. Right? I mean, you balance it. And that's where I've always said is you've got the key to a great team is the great evaluators. I mean, you can talk all you want about, you know, Georgia recruiting 5-stars, but Jalen Warren, I think, was Jalen Carter, I believe, was a highly ranked player coming out. I'm pretty sure he was. Jordan Davis wasn't. I'm pretty sure Jalen Carter was a 5-star. Jordan Davis was a 3-star. They were both first-round draft picks, great college players, but they got there in very different ways.
Yeah.
And that's all my point, is talent is what matters.
Yeah, the comparison I always use is Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I think Jamar Chase was a 4 or 5-star recruited kid. Justin Jefferson was like the 1,800 rated player coming out of the 2017 class. Yeah. He's a 3-star. Now he's one of, if not the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Right. It just depends on how you develop the talent.
Jamar Chase was a 5-star. I mean, he was a dude coming out.
Yeah. And LSU wanted him to play running back.
Abdul Carter was ranked as the number 33 linebacker in the nation by 247 coming out of high school. He was the number 287 composite player. I mean, so we just looked at Penn State, a semifinal team. One of their stars was a 5-star, Abdul Carter. I mean, Nicholas Singleton. Another one of their stars was a 3-star guy that nobody thought was going to be. And another one was a top 250-ish kind of guy that one of the services that sucks. I mean, one of the services, 247, didn't even think was one of the 30 best linebackers in the country. He was the number 9 player in the state of Pennsylvania. He's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick, but he was the number 9 player in his class in Pennsylvania, according to 247 Sports. So you had 3 top 250, top 300 type of guy, 3-star, 5-star, all became college stars. That's the point. And so that's why Penn State has a blue chip ratio of 61 that's down at 13th, but yet they're playing in the national semifinals and they're a 10-11 win team every year. They have the same exact blue chip ratio as Miami, who is not even close to that. And here's the other funny part about that Miami's having a top 15 blue chip ratio. You may look at it and say, well, hey, that tracks pretty well, because if you look at Miami this year, what was their record, Trev? Like 10-3? So yes. 10-3, 61%. You're the 13th blue chip ratio. That tracks, right? Doesn't that track with how they were? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, but here's the thing. Take away their 2-star rated quarterback, because that's what he was coming out of high school. What kind of team does Miami have this year? Their whole success was built on the backs of a guy that had to go to junior college and incarnate word coming out of high school.
Yeah, that's facts.
So I just that's why I say is, like, of course the recruiting services are going to spend numbers to show you that you need their services. That's why they always give you the overall ranking, not the starters or the impact player or things along those lines. Oh, look, so-and-so was drafted number 8 overall. We had him as a 5-star. How come they never tweet that out about the number 3 overall pick that they had as a 2-star? So, yeah. Great first question. I have a feeling now that we're not going to be able to get to all the questions because of that. We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. I'm so sorry. It's a good first one.
Ronnie Reeves, walk me through a typical home visit for a top recruit. What kind of things are actually discussed, and how do they try to start or continue that relationship? Is it like the Blind Side movie?
It's not like the Blind Side movie. Really, honestly, Ronnie, it all depends on the player. It's so different. It's essentially the in-home visits are a close in a lot of instances. They're starting to change a little bit because now you can actually do in-homes for rising seniors or juniors. So like Notre Dame did an in-home visit this spring with Tiki Hola. I mean, so it's changing a little bit because the signing day being so much sooner, the early signing period being sooner. But it's about whatever the needs are for that player. What's the closing argument for that player? What does it matter? Like who was it that was I'm trying to remember who was on Sean's show. And they were talking about, no, it was Jerome Bettis was talking about this on a show where he's talking about how Lou Holtz came into their in-home visit and he walked right past Jerome and walked right past his dad and went right to his mama. Why? Because Lou knew that's how you win Jerome Bettis's recruitment. I got to have his mama on my side. And what did Jerome say when Lou left? You're going to go play for that man. You're going to go play for Lou Holtz. Okay, mama, that's what we're doing. You know, I mean, that it's different for every kid. For some kids, it's I got to get dad on my side. For some kids, it's like, look, this is the family's hiccup. We've got to convince them that this is going to be okay. Or, yeah, that's true, but this is why it shouldn't matter or whatever the kid. It's just so different for every kid. but it's really about what do we need to close. You don't start relationships with in-home. That's a closer to where the relationship has already started. We're trying to take it to the next level. It's almost like if you want to talk about it being a relationship, the in-home visit is that moment in a guy-girl relationship, male-female relationship, where you kind of take the girl home. I'm a guy, so I'm going to talk about taking the girl home to meet your mama. Is like you've already been on some dates. You've already gone to some places. You've established your relationship with her. Now it's about, I'm taking her home to meet. It's potentially closing time because, like, I got to make sure mama likes her. You know what I mean? Like, I was a bit of a mama's boy. So, of course, my mom liking a girl is kind of important to me. Fortunately for me, my mom likes my wife a lot. So, but, you know, it's more of it's closing time type of thing. You know, that's more of where it's at. And so it's almost, or you're going home to your lady's house and you're going to ask her dad for your hand in marriage. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. You know, it's like it's Notre Dame going to ask, you know, 5-star quarterback's dad if I can, you know, I mean, can we, you know, are you okay with your kid coming to our program? You know, we want to, it's kind of that kind of thing. It's much different than what you're doing to start a relationship. And it's nothing like the blind. So you don't have some little 8-year-old negotiating the terms of the deal. Not quite like that.
Fair enough. Question in here from Sly Fox 110404. Any concerns on lack of recruiting momentum, or do you chalk it up as it's only March and be patient?
Sly Fox, I would encourage you to watch our show yesterday. Best thing you can do is go to the Irish Breakdown podcast, and we have a segment about that from yesterday, part of the RTCF show. We did a whole hour plus on this very question. And so I can answer it for you very, very briefly, but you're going to get a much better answer because it's yes, you should chalk it up to it's only March after you lost your recruiting coordinator, GM, after you lost one of his top lieutenants in Caleb Davis, who took a job at Indigo State. You lost your defensive coordinator and you lost your stud running backs coach. Your season didn't end until January 20th, and you had time for one recruiting weekend, and you had to immediately get on the road, and then dead period hits. It is that, but it's not. It's also, you can't also just completely dismiss and blame it all on that. There are also some things that they got to do. You know, they got to do better. So it's just no way I'm going to get into a mailbag and answer that question, especially since we just did a show on it yesterday. So I would really encourage you to go to the podcast app and pull up the segment we did yesterday on that. And I thought Sean and I had a very good long discussion saying, hey, look, calm down, take a deep breath. It's only March 10th, but these are some things they're going to have to do better if they're going to overcome that. And when we get to May 1st, we're all feeling better about it. There's things they got to do in order to get us there. It's not automatically going to be that way. So it's a little bit of both.
Another question from Sly Fox. If we had to rely on one of our quarterbacks to pass a bunch to win games, who do you like, or is our wide receiver room not up to the task for now?
I mean, my answer on this is going to be, it's pretty well known. It's CJ Carr, but I also think Kenny's more than capable of that. I think both of those kids are capable of that, but if I can only pick one, I'd probably pick CJ. But if I had to go with Kenny, I'd still feel pretty darn good about it. I think both of those kids are outstanding. And the only reason I'm not saying Kenny is just because of how I think CJ is just different. I do. But if CJ wasn't at Notre Dame, I'd be super fired up about Kenny Minchie for this spring. I would be super fired up. And I won't be shocked if Kenny wins a starting job. But if you ask me who's that one guy, it's CJ Carr. It's CJ Carr. And this question was submitted pretty early in the show, so it was before a lot of our conversation. It was at 1:18, so it was before we even got into the Jaden Greathouse and Malachi Fields talk. So I think a lot of that answered kind of your question about whether or not we think the receivers are up to the task. I think Jaden Greathouse showed if you have to throw the ball a lot, he can dominate. Yeah. Against the best of the best. So it would be CJ. But if I had to roll with Kenny for whatever reason, I'm still feel really good about it because I think that kid can throw a ton. I think Steve, I'd be more concerned. I think Steve's he's more of a complimentary quarterback, a game manager type that can make some plays here and there. He's not a, bro, we need you to throw 50. He's not that guy in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with that. Mad one for ND. How difficult would it be to transition one of those big linemen into a blocking tight end? And do you believe it would be feasible?
I don't think you need to transition them into anything. I don't think that's how it works. It's hey, sixth offensive lineman, when we go whatever personnel near the goal line or third down, we're going to put you in the game, and your blocking rules don't change. Are you covered or uncovered? Do you have a guy on you outside, or is the tackle covered? If it is, and we're running, G scheme, then you're down blocking. If your inside guy's uncovered, then you're working to the tight end up to the second level, or you're working to the linebacker, depending on what kind of scheme we're running. We've seen Notre Dame do that before. They did with Joe Alt. They didn't transition Joe Alt into a tight end that year. They just put him there and put a jersey on him and said, hey, we're running inside zone. Your rules don't change whether you're a tight end or a center. Your rules are still covered, uncovered rules. Same thing. And so I don't think there's any transition that requires, except from transitioning from your 70 number to an 80 number or a 90 number or a 40 number. That's really the only transition that you need, is to change your jersey number or declare that you're in the game as an eligible receiver. But I would absolutely do that, honestly, Mad One. So, like, even though I'm kind of dismissing your question from the need of, do you need to transition anyone into that? I'm loving the premise you're coming with, because especially in a situation where you are a little thin at tight end, and a situation where I do want to find a way to get either Sullivan Absher or Gerby Lambert, or potentially like Anthony, like let's say Anthony Knapp's not starting. I'm freaking putting that kid in, making sure that we have an 80-something jersey or a 40-something jersey ready to throw on him whenever we're in goal line or third down. Hey, get that athletic kid running outside zone as a tight end. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But if he's not starting, and let's say let's say the starting lineup is Knapp, left to right, Knapp, Schrouth, Craig, Jagasol, and Wagner. You're telling me there's no value in having Sullivan Absher or Gerby Lambert in the position to do what Joe Alt did in 2021 in obvious running downs, 3rd and 1, power situations, goal line. I don't care that it's an offensive lineman, they're going to run. Duh, it's 1st and goal at the 3-inch line. Of course we're running the football. I don't care that you know that. You're just not going to be able to do anything about it. I think there's tons, and especially with the way that Notre Dame runs a lot of their play action passes, they've oftentimes will have the second tight end pass pro anyway out of 12 personnel. So if you're going to have a guy sitting back in pass pro, why not put a 6th offensive lineman in there to give you some run dominance, and you're still going to pass pro with that guy, and you can still release 4. You can still release the other tight end, 2 receivers and a back. So you're still okay there. And so I would absolutely, that's a one way to really take advantage of your depth on the offensive line. So I'm all for the idea. I just don't think that requires anything from a transition standpoint. You got to know your assignment, but your assignment doesn't change a whole lot. It's not going to be a whole lot different. You're saying, hey, as a tight end in this pass pro, you need to look here and here as opposed to here and here as a tackle. But if you're playing tackle, you better freaking know what the tight end's responsibility is as a tackle. So you're already going to know what that guy's supposed to do. Now you just know, okay, now it's my job to do what he normally does. So I think there's a ton of value in it, Mad One. Like I said, I'm rejecting the need to transition somebody, but I love the premise of what you're saying. It would absolutely be feasible. And if I was Notre Dame, I would absolutely do it.
Yeah, 100%. Aiden Benami, is it possible or legal for Notre Dame to have the spring game after the portal closes? Doesn't help players, but wanted to ask.
Well, I think it all depends on when the semester ends. You can have it the way that the spring rules are is it's built. I think you have to end by a certain time before the semester or quarter ends. Is the only rule that I think they have. I don't think you have there. I don't believe there's any rules that dictate you have to be done before the portal closes. That's not a coach's concern. And if anything, I'd kind of want to know, hey, this is when spring is going to go over. So if you plan on jumping into portal, do it before spring starts. But once you're committed, once you get there for spring and we start practices, you're committing to be here through the end of spring. Now, you can't hold guys to that, but you can at least try to get guys onto their word and maybe weed out some guys that otherwise would. But I don't believe that there's any rules that prevent you from doing that, I did.
Jason Smith, do you think Anthony Rizak gets a scholarship at Notre Dame. Have you heard anything about his development? I know he's still very young. Say in 3 years, is he good enough to be a factor, start, or backup?
I love his athleticism. He's got tools. He's got really nice size. If there comes a day where Anthony Rizak is your backup quarterback, would I be shocked by that? Not entirely. A little surprised, because that means, that either a Noah Grubbs or a Blake Hebert's not healthy or not progressing. But I think he's a very valuable member of your depth chart. There's no question about that. And Anthony Rizak could be the reason in a few years you don't need to go to the portal to get a quarterback to be your backup. Because why do we need to go to the portal to get some kid from some other school to be our number 2? We got Anthony. He can ball. If we need him to, he can ball. Certainly, he's a different type of quarterback. And I think that's partly what intrigues me as a backup, is because you put him in the game and we're running some read zone and we're running some quarterback runs, and because he's a really athletic kid. I'd absolutely value his place in the depth chart. No question about that. Will he get a scholarship? I don't know that he will. I assume at some point in time he will, especially when they go to 105. I assume at some point in time Anthony Rizak will get a scholarship. Will that be in year 2, year 3, year 4? I don't know the answer to that. But if he stays at Notre Dame for 4 years, I'll be shocked if at least one of those years he's not on scholarship. Shocked. I love having Anthony Rizak on the roster. I mean, he gives you a 6'4" athletic kid with a solid arm to play scout team every week. Are you kidding me? Sign me up, especially when you're playing all these run-throw quarterbacks. Chase that kid around for a week. Good luck with that. It's going to make that kid you're playing on Saturday not seem as dynamic. You know what I mean? And so I love the kid on the roster. Will he ever be a starter at Notre Dame? Highly doubt it. Barring it being because someone else is injured. I just don't think he has that kind of arm talent to be on. I mean, there's a reason his D1 offers were Air Force, Army, Navy. It's not just because he's a patriotic kid. It's because he's more of an option quarterback than he is a drop back throwing quarterback. Now, he's learning a lot at Notre Dame. He's certainly improved in that area a bunch. But he's more of a MAC level starter than he is a Notre Dame level starter as of right now. Could that change someday? Sure. Because again, he's 6'4" and he's athletic. That could certainly change. But that's just where I think Anthony is right now. But if I had to offer him a scholarship to keep him here, and you're allowed to give out 105, would I argue that there's value in making him one of your 105? Absolutely.
Totally.
As long as he's like with it. This is my rule for any kid on scholarship, whether it's a converted walk-on or a normal one, is are you a good teammate? Like, I wouldn't care about that. You're not a headache and a problem child. If you are, then like, dude, walk, transfer. But that's true for my number 1 recruit in the class. It's true for my walk-ons. But everything I've heard about Anthony Rizak is he's a dude, coach, I'll do whatever you need me to do. That's what I've heard about him. And you got a kid like that who's 6'4", athletic, and was a state player of the year, sign me up for having him on my team. And if it takes a scholarship to keep him here, okay, do what you got to do. So yes. And how great would that be for the Rizaks? Because you got 2 sons that you're getting free educations at Notre Dame at some point in time. Now, obviously, they had to pay for the first year, but basically what the Rizaks have done is they got a buy one, get one free deal at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? It's like, because Anthony, they got to pay for, but Teddy gets to go to school for free. You know what I mean? So, but I've heard nothing but great things about both young men, great teammates, athletic kids, really good football players. They're just young and developing. So that's how I feel about Anthony. Good question, Jason.
Aiden Benami, can you explain rugby style tackling? Never heard of that before. LOL. Sounds lame to me, but I'm old school, maybe ignorant.
Rugby tackling is more referring to the style as opposed to, so like in rugby tackling, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't really know a lot of the rules, but you can't tackle high in rugby. I don't believe. You have to go low. I think there's rules about going high. They don't have pads on. Rugby tackling for football is more a technique that's meant to get the head out of it. So like when we were kids, Trev, I don't know if it was you, but you're taught face into the, face up, you see what you hit, you wrap up, you explode your face right through a guy's chest. And that was how I was taught to tackle. Rugby tackling is more about sort of side tackling, ideally getting your head behind the runner, grabbing low around the knee, and then rolling into the tackle. It's meant to prevent the head from being the primary point of impact, which is how tackling was for a lot of my life. So it's just a style of technique meant to remove the head from being as much of a factor as it is, as it has been for traditional. Now, it's been around a lot longer than people think. Pete Carroll made it kind of famous, but I mean, I've known coaches that have taught that for a while. It just wasn't called rugby tackling. It's just they just felt it was a better way of tackling. So that's a very generic explanation, but that's kind of how I would explain that one. Trav, anything to add to that?
No, everything that I just looked up online, it's a safer form of tackling, to your point about not really leading as much with your head. There was one thing that I read that it potentially could cause more turnovers because the goal is to have your head from behind and then wrap where your arm is from the ball. Because like I guess in rugby, I don't really know the rules of rugby, if I'm being honest. And so I guess big goal in rugby, not that it's not in football, is to force turnovers like from ball carries, like forcing a lot of fumbles. So that's another positive, I guess, to rugby tackling, but I don't know enough about it to give an in-depth difference, I should say.
I also want to point out that I can't wait to see what happened, but Notre Dame beat Pitt 55-54. Tay Davis hit a free throw with like less than a second left on the clock.
0.5 seconds left. Yeah.
Nice win. Win for them. Real nice win for Notre Dame. They need to end the season on a good note. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get another one, but at least, they had a great win at the end of the regular season. Actually won the last two, beat Stanford, beat obviously Cal in 4 overtimes. Marcus Burton drops over 40. And this win is opposite. They won their last game 112-110. They won this one 55-54. But Trev, you said this to me the other day. Notre Dame needs to make games ugly. That's when they have a shot to win. And 55-54 is very freaking ugly. And they got it done. So, yep, that's a big win. Big win. Who do they get next Trev?
North Carolina.
Okay. They played North Carolina tough earlier in the year, so we'll see if they can they've only played them once, right? And they lost by a point.
Yep.
See if
and I think that was on the road.
It was at home.
Was it at home? I know. Okay, I knew one of Duke or North Carolina was a. Okay.
Yeah, they had a great second half comeback. They're down 7 at halftime, ended up losing by. They had a lead, if I remember correctly, late in the game, just couldn't keep it. So, be nice to win a couple, end the season on a good note. You know, so.
Yep, Nikita Konstantinovsky was 1 rebound away from a double-double.
I know. I saw he had 10. He was second on the team and scoring it with 10. Here's the great thing is they won the game with Marcus Burton only scoring 10 points.
Yeah. Yep. They did not shoot well from beyond the arc. They were 420.
Yeah. Marcus went 4 of 14. So you won a game with him only scoring 10 points. That's a nice win. It's a real nice win. Real nice win. I love how much they're playing the freshmen too. They're starting to get those 3 kids going. That's very nice. Very nice. All right, back on track. I just saw that final go through, so I just wanted to make note of that from some folks. It's a very, very nice win. All right, we got a bunch from Salty, so let's get a few of his questions now.
Let's do it. Where will the linebacker group rank amongst all teams this season?
I think it's a top 5 unit. I asked that question of you guys in the show. I jumped in and asked it of you, and I was surprised that you both seemed to sell that I said that I think by the end of the year, the case we made that Notre Dame has, what was it, the best linebacking core in the unit in the country? And I thought you kind of both didn't sell it. I think you both held because you were afraid to say sell to the boss's question.
Oh, no.
I think it's a buy. I think by the end of the year, people are going to be talking about Notre Dame having the best linebacking core in the country. I think at the very least, they'll be in the conversation of being the best linebacker group. I think they're one of the 5 to 6 best going into the season. And if you still have doubts about it, go watch the Georgia game. Georgia had a really good linebacking core. Watch Notre Dame's linebackers in that game and tell me that Notre Dame's not on that level. Because I won't. You can tell me that actually all you want. I just won't believe you. But they are. I think they already have going into next year. And now Drake's going into his second year as a starter. Kingston's going to be a sophomore next year. Jaden Osbury, who played almost none at all as a freshman, he goes into year 2 as a key member of the rotation. Jalen Snead's going to senior year. You add Madden Faramo to the mix. It's like, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be real fun. So I think they are already in the conversation as one of the 5 best. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I project that by the end of the year, people are going to argue that they're the best. At least I will. But if you want to just be, let's see, top 5, I'm comfortable with that. Very comfortable with that. That's where I would rank them. I don't think there's 5 better linebacker units coming back next year, top to bottom in this group.
No.
What say you, Trev?
No, I mean, it's similar answer to what I gave when you popped in and asked it. I said at the start of the season, I think they're top 5, not 5th. And by the end of the season, I think there's absolutely a discussion for them to be somewhere along the top 3. Again, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because, again, I'm drawing a lot of comparisons to the running back room. And I think it's going to be a lot of that. Like top to bottom, I think that it could be the best. Like I said, I think Notre Dame's running back room was one of the best last year, the best last year. But you look at the box scores of games, you look at the overall stat sheet. You don't look at Aeneas Williams' numbers and say, yeah, he is absolutely one of the reasons why this is the best running back room in the country. I could see the linebacking room having a little bit similar of that just because of how much they're going to rotate. But if you watch them, I think that they absolutely could be. I'm going to be interested to see what Ohio State's linebacking core does this year with Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. They could probably put up a lot of numbers. Who knows where they're going to fit in. Texas's linebacking core is going to be interesting to watch again this year. So there's some good ones. But I think when everything is all said and done, absolutely.
Have a good one. They lost Kobe King, but DeChico step in the lineup. Tony Rojas comes back. They've got some good young players there. There's going to be a lot of good linebacking units, but I think Notre Dame will take a back seat to nobody. Backseat to nobody. I'm very much looking forward to seeing that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Me too.
A lot of fun. Speaking of linebackers, we also have one from Salty, and I think we kind of answered this one, Trev, a little bit earlier. It says, which LB will have the most productive season? Drake Bowen, Jaden Osborne, the King, Kingston Villiam. I think we kind of answered that. We think it's going to be Drake Bowen, correct? That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one from Salty. Brian, do you wish you were still on a cruise yet?
No. I feel like I am. I'm still having a little bit of the rocking. Like I'm not rocking, but it feels like I'm, because it was we had some storm. Like one of the days we were supposed to go into Freeport and we couldn't because the storms were bad. So we had to circle around for the entire day and then come back to Nassau. And we couldn't dock in Nassau. So we were supposed to dock in Nassau the first day. Then we went to Half Moon Cay the second day. And then we're going to go to Freeport the third day. So what happened is we couldn't dock in Nassau because of the weather, and it was real rocky. So then we ended up going to Half Moon Cay. That was a beautiful day. And then the next day we're supposed to go to Freeport. There was a big storm there, so we had to go all the way back around to Nassau, and then we docked in Nassau. And then the trip back was rough, the first part of the trip back. So the day where we had a whole sea day, the first part of that was very rough. We did a show, like they do like cover songs of like 80s and 70s and 80s rock songs. And they're pretty decent. Some of them they did really well. It's like, don't try to cover Bon Jovi. That's not a guy you want to try to cover. He's got a very distinct voice and you're just not hitting it. But they couldn't do the whole performance. They had to do it seated and standing. They couldn't do their normal performance because the conditions were too rough. So I still have a little bit of this going on where I'm not rocking, but I feel like I am when I'm standing up or sometimes even sitting down. But I mean, it was fun. It was relaxing. I, ate some good food, and but I'm very glad to be home. I'm glad to be back at work. Glad to be back doing shit. Glad to be home in my home, like sleeping in my bed, and I got a video, Trev. I have to show you next time you're in town, or I'll send it to you. But we videoed. And I videoed Ange walking in to the house and just Rita and Sadie going crazy. It's awesome.
That's awesome.
But I'm glad to be back. It was good to see my family, and I got to eat some all-you-can-eat. I went to Captain George's on Saturday, got some all-you-can-eat seafood before I left town. So it was a good vacation, ready to go, but I'm very happy to be back. Very happy to be back. My wife, I don't know if she'll agree with that, but I'm happy to be back. I'm very happy to be back.
Joseph Barrett, Brian, would Notre Dame have beaten Texas had Texas knocked off Ohio State?
I think so. I mean, football is a game of matchups, and number one, I just think Texas struggled with physical football teams, and I'm not in the transitive property of, well, Georgia beat Texas twice, Notre Dame beat Texas, therefore Notre Dame. But the reasons that Georgia beat Texas is why I think Notre Dame would have beat Texas. And the reason Georgia beat Texas is because they just physically beat them up in the trenches. And I think Notre Dame would have done the exact same thing to Texas. I think they would have physically beat them up in the trenches. And I think Texas would have had a much tougher time defending the Notre Dame offense than maybe they did some others. And an example of that is what Notre Dame did to Ohio State. I mean, Notre Dame beat themselves offensively in the first and second quarter. Second quarter. I mean, that really determined the game right there. Their first drive of the game, they went right down the field, long touchdown drive. They didn't get the ball back till the second quarter, and then just had 2 drives where they just did nothing. And it was all self-inflicted wounds, Trev. I broke it down at Irish Breakdown. I made a video of like, this could have been. I mean, there was 2 plays where I thought Jadarian Price could have housed it if it wasn't for mistakes by – one was a false start, and the other was Rocco Spindler didn't go. If he kind of crashed into the B gap instead of leading around and reading the edge. And if he gets around, Jadarian's waiting on him to bounce it. And if he bounces it, it's Rocco, Jadarian, and one Ohio State defender.
Oh, yeah.
That all year had been pretty good odds. It was a lot of self-inflicted wounds that hurt him. And I don't know that Texas would have been able to take advantage of Notre Dame in the way that Ohio State did, because I think Notre Dame would have dominated them in the trenches, and that would have allowed them to win a relatively low-scoring game. I think it would have been like a 24-21, 27-20. It looked a lot like the Penn State game, to be honest with you, score-wise. But I think Notre Dame would have beat Texas, yes. I think Ohio State was the worst matchup for Notre Dame. And I think the second worst matchup for Notre Dame was Oregon. That would have been the second worst matchup for Notre Dame.
Yeah, based on what we saw from Sark in big games last season, he relied too heavily on his, I guess you could call it, passing game schematics.
His play calling, his genius.
And the strength of Notre Dame's defense is their secondary. And I don't think Texas's wide receivers were as good as what Ohio State's were. I mean, Matthew Golden was good. Isaiah Bond was good. They're not Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka.
Right.
So,
agreed.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame would have won.
And it really also comes down to Quinn Ewers just wasn't playing at the same level as Will Howard. Yeah. Texas didn't have the run game to complement their pass game the way that Ohio State did. Mm-hmm. And their defense isn't as physical as Ohio State's. I mean, Notre Dame showed that, hey, we can handle athletic defenses. We did that to Penn State. We did that to Ohio State. We can handle athletes. Where Notre Dame's offense gets into trouble is when you've got when you fly to the ball and you're really physical, and Ohio State played that way. And so I think that's really what gave Notre Dame some problems. But I don't think Texas could have given them the same type of problems that Ohio State did. I just don't.
Agreed.
And and Isaiah Bond, I mean, he didn't really do a whole lot in the postseason from what I remember. Mm-hmm. I think he was a little banged up if I recall. So he didn't play against Clemson or Arizona State, and only caught 1 pass against Ohio State. So he wasn't even full go. And I like Matthew Golden a lot. He was a pickup that I talked a lot about that I thought was very underrated for Texas last year, but he's not Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Egbuka as a player. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you on that, Trev. It'd have been a good game. They're not going to. They're going to crush Texas. I just think they'd have beat them. I think they were a better team than Texas.
I think it would have looked in a different way, but like the flow of the game, I think would have looked a little bit similar to Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Similar
like score, similar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I think they would have ran the ball a lot better on Texas than they had on the other teams that they played.
Me too.
Yeah. Texas had a very good defense, but again, it's about matchups. It's about how do you match up against certain teams, and the reality is Texas's secondary was good, but it wasn't as good as people made it out to be because they just didn't really play anybody that could really throw the ball a whole lot. I mean, you look at the regular season, they played Colorado State, Michigan, UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Florida, and I don't know did DJ Lagway play that game? I'd have to go back and look. Arkansas, who can't throw the ball, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Georgia. Name me a good passing offense in that group. Name me one. And the answer is you can't. and DJ Lagway did not play against Texas.
The two best passing offenses that they played were Clemson and Arizona State, arguably. And Arizona State took them to overtime. And
Clemson passed for 336. Arizona State passed for 296. And Ohio State passed for 289 on them. And then Arizona State also ran for 214. And so I think Notre Dame would have ran all over Texas. They gave up 197 to Florida. You know,
and I think Arizona State was without their 1,000-yard receiver for that game too, weren't they?
Yes, because he didn't play in their last game. They didn't have him for the I think he got hurt. I don't think he played in the
conference game either.
Big 12 title game either. I'm gonna have to go look. Yeah, he got hurt against Arizona. So he didn't play against Iowa State or Texas. And he was playing really good football when he went down. He was a good football.
He was. He sure was. Salty Virginia Peanuts, who has the highest ceiling, Leonard Moore or Christian Gray?
Probably Leonard Moore. I just think he's a little fat. He's faster. He's taller. He's stronger. I mean, I think Christian's a little bit more elusive, a little bit maybe twitchier, change of direction, quickness. But I think Leonard Moore overall has the higher ceiling. Yeah.
Agreed. What changes will Chris Ash introduce defensively, and will it start in the spring practices?
I don't know. I mean, he hasn't been a D coordinator but one season. That was a COVID season where he had no off season in the last 10 years. I have no idea what changes he's going to make. That's something I'm looking forward to learning. But one thing I can say for sure, Salty, is it will start now. I mean, anything that you're going to change, you start day one. You focus on those day one. And they've already started on it in some of the team workouts. So yeah, that would be one. Yeah.
Yep.
Now we had a couple down here from other people that's not salty. We'll try to get to some more salties before we get out of here, but let's get to a few of these others.
Joseph Barrett, hearing lots of speculation about NIL trending to 2-year deals. Do you think this is direction, especially given the impending revenue share model?
I think you're going to see more people try to do that, but at the end of the day, what's to keep them from? I mean, look what just happened with the kid from Wisconsin. He signed a 2-year deal, transferred anyway, and they let him do it. So look, until there's rules in place that are backed by congressional legislation, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I just want to throw up just saying this. But it's gotten to the point now where the NCAA can't win in court. Not because they don't have, in some of these instances, the righteous side. It's because right now we're in a – if you think that judges just rule by the law and they just go by the law and they bull crap, anyone that thinks that is not paying attention. And I got to question your sanity at this point in time. And that includes judges of all ilks. So I just look at it and say, right now, the cool thing is to be pro player and against the NCAA, even when the NCAA is in the right. And they're gonna lose every case. That's just the reality of it. So that's why. And then now you've got all these states doing different rules. Well, let's make a rule that benefits our state. I gotta love the fact that I think the state legislature in Georgia rejected a proposal to allow football players to be tax exempt. Why? What makes them special compared to the hardworking UPS truck driver or the hardworking garbage man or the hardworking postman or hardworking factory worker or farmer or anyone else that's doing any kind of like blue collar work or any kind of work? What makes them so special? Because they're better athletes? If anything, give the other people bigger tax breaks, and those guys that are getting $1 million contracts should be paying a little bit more taxes. It did fail, but you're seeing a lot of states do that, where they're creating these rules. Well, the NCAA can't do this. What the heck are we doing here then? Like you all bitch and complain about the rules and then whenever the NCAA then hammers you for breaking one of those rules, like, well, I know we supported this rule, but we didn't want you to actually enforce it against us. So now we're going to sue you because we know we're going to win. And it's a joke. And that's why you need congressional legislation. And I always feel like whenever you need Congress to save you, you're just delaying the inevitable. You're eventually going to die a very sad, pitiful death. This is just going to delay the inevitable. But then let's say they get rid of the NCAA and they start some other entity. The same crap's going to happen. So eventually you're going to need some sort of federal, antitrust type of thing that's going to be needed here. And then you can get into more, the contracts mean something. If you sign a 3-year deal, you have to honor that contract. Because like a guy in the NFL doesn't have to play for, if you sign a 4-year deal in the NFL, you don't want to play for the team you signed a deal with. You don't have to play. No one's going to make you play. You're not going to get paid and you can't play for anybody else, but you don't have to play. But right now, I mean, the kid Lucas from Wisconsin signed a 2-year deal and said, screw it, I'm going to Miami anyway, and was allowed to do it. So it won't change anything until there's congressional legislation protecting the NCAA or whatever governing body there is in college football that says, hey, when we make these rules, you got to live by them. And if you don't want to live by them, then go find another league to play in. That's what's going to have to happen. Until then, none of this crap means anything. Kids can do whatever they want because now we're in an era where we just let young people do whatever the heck they want, and we can't do anything to them because we're pro player. No, you're not. You're soft. That's all you are. You want to be accepted. You don't want to actually do the hard thing. You don't want to have to offer the hard criticism that you may get criticized for. And I have no use for those type of people, but that's what the sport's turned into. So until the rules change and the governing body has some protections, it's not going to matter. They can sign 2-year deals, 3-year deals. If a kid wants to leave, he can leave.
Fair enough. Andrew Gilmore, you said to remind you about my buy-sell hold on Buckner. It's unfortunate that he's basically not allowed to compete as a backup. His Gator Bowl performance was so interesting. Why not have packages?
This is a good question, and here's the reason why Tyler Buckner's not allowed to compete for the backup quarterback job, because he left. He left the program. He chose to transfer to another school. I'm not mad at him for it. You had to do what you have to do, but you didn't want to be here. Other kids did. It didn't work out for you. You didn't go to Bama, dominate, and realize how much you missed Notre Dame, so you wanted to come back. You went to Bama, didn't work out. You came back. And the deal was you can come back, but this is what you got to do. He's now missed, 2 years of development of the position? He's just not going to beat out those other kids at this stage of the development by losing that. Had Tyler Buckner stayed at Notre Dame and stayed as the backup to Sam Hartman, Riley Leonard, I don't think ever comes to Notre Dame. And if Tyler would have been able to stay healthy in 2024, I don't put it past him to have a similar season to what Riley Leonard had. That's how high I was on Tyler Buckner. And I think the success he had in the South Carolina game is evidence of his potential, but he just was never able to develop that. And then he chose to leave. Steve Angeli didn't. Steve Angeli could have left just like Tyler Buckner did after they brought in Riley Leonard. Think about the same scenario. Sophomore year, they bring in a portal quarterback. You chose to stay in battle and see it through, and then I'll battle again next year instead of leaving. Tyler chose to leave. Now, the sad thing is I don't think, from what I've been told, I don't think it was necessarily Tyler's decision. I think there were some outside influences that encouraged him to leave. And that's why I think he ultimately came back. I think he left because of other influences that came back because that's what he wanted to do. Having said all that, if they have 2 transfers after this spring, I'm flat out moving Tyler Buckner back to quarterback, and he'll be my backup quarterback. He'll compete to be my backup quarterback, 100%, because I think he can play. And he's a guy that you can put in search to have an offensive system geared towards him, that if you ever have to go to him, you go to him. The reason I don't care about any packages is because as much as dynamic as an athlete as he is, if I'm going to get the ball to somebody other than my starting quarterback, it's going to be to Jeremiah Love. It's going to be to Jadarian Price. It's going to be to Aeneas Williams. It's going to be to Kedron Young. It's going to be to those guys, not Tyler. Tyler's a very athletic kid, but if I'm going to have a package, I'm going to have a package that's going to do something to get, I don't need to take CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie off the field in order to do that. Now, if Steve Angeli's a quarterback, I might be more prone to some sort of package because I think you need more playmaking ability on the field. But if the other 2 kids are at quarterback, I don't need a package for Tyler Buckner. The only way I would put a package in for Tyler Buckner is if he's just so impactful in the spring and fall camp that you're just like, dude, this kid's got to get the football because he can play for us. The quote unquote punishment was you're a walk-on and you got to play receiver your first year. He did all that. He was a great teammate. He made some plays for you. If you need him back at quarterback now, I'd move him back to quarterback. I don't know that Tyler wants to play quarterback again. I have no idea. So, but if you have 2 transfers, I would absolutely move him back. But he shouldn't be competing for the backup quarterback job because he chose to leave, and the lost time of development makes me believe he's not the quarterback those other guys are right now. So that's where I'm at. It's a very, very fair question, Andrew. But yeah.
From Wody, do you see Bodie Cahoon being a contributor on defense, or does he need a couple more years to develop?
Not on this year's defense. I think Bodie Cahoon, when he's healthy, and I don't know where he's at. Was he on the list, Trev? Was he on the injury list? Do you remember that you put out the other day?
No, I don't think that he was.
Okay, as long as he's healthy, I think Bodie Cahoon is a guy that could become a really good special teams player this year if he's healthy. Like, if you were to ask me who replaces Jack Kaiser on special teams, him and Teddy Rizak might be my top 2 options. I just think Bodie's need for development, his missed time on injury this year, because he's still remember, his senior year was really his first full year playing linebacker, because he played some safety and was a hybrid guy his first 3 years. And the senior year, or was it his junior year was his first year playing linebacker? But the point is he hasn't played linebacker for very long. He's still got a lot to learn, and they're loaded there. So I don't think Bodie is going to be a contributor this year. However, if you had a rash of injuries and all of a sudden Bodie Cahoon's in your 2 deep, I'm like, all right, cool, let's roll, man. Because he's a very talented player. I grade him as a 4-star kid. I think he's just not where those other guys are right now. And then the injury didn't help with that. But if I'm looking for someone to run down on kickoff and someone to block for me on kick return and somebody to get after it in the punt coverage situation or the punt block situation, hey, 36, come over here, get some reps. That's what I'm doing. Hey, 35, Teddy Rizak, you come over here and get some of these opportunities as well. I think those kids have a chance to be really good special teams players in the next couple of years, and then eventually have a shot to be starters on defense. I'm not ruling out him being a potential impact player on defense. I'm just saying it's unlikely this season because everybody's back except for Jack Kaiser. I mean, I don't know that you need to replace Jack Kaiser with another person. I think Jack Kaiser's minutes are going to primarily be replaced by somebody already in the rotation. More to Drake or more to Kingston or more to Jaden Osborne, more to Jalen Sneed. I don't think like, okay, Matt Faramo, you're number 5. You replace Jack Kaiser. No. Or Kingston replaces Jack, Jaden replaces Kingston, Jalen replaces Jaden, and then, Teddy replaces whatever. Madden, I just think you're going to see more of a 4-man instead of a 5-man this year. Doesn't mean Madden won't have a shot to play. I just think you'll see more of that than the other way around.
Sure.
Last couple. We answered that one. Salty asked about Jalen Sneed. I would encourage you to read Trevor's article about this on Monday. He wrote a really good feature on that talks about the potential for Jalen Sneed to be a potential breakout player this season for Notre Dame. Last couple. Let's do this one, and then we'll get to one about recruiting at the very end.
What role will Jared Dawson play this season?
Well, I think he's going to be a really good part of the rotation. Thinking about Jared Dawson, projecting to him is, here's what I can say about Jared Dawson. When he's on the field this year, I expect him to be disruptive and productive. Because that's what he's done for 3 years at Louisville. Like this year wasn't like where he did nothing. Like Chris Mitchell didn't do a whole lot till 2023. Then he broke out, and then Jared Dawson's been a pretty key. He's been a pretty decent rotation player for 3 years at Louisville. That's what I know. Here's what I don't know. Can he do at Notre Dame on a 40 snap basis what he did at Louisville on a 20 snap basis or 25 snap basis? That's what I don't know. Can he be as productive at 40 to 50 snaps like Howard Cross and Riley Mills were? That I don't know. So at the very least, he's a talented, disruptive interior player that can give you at least 20 to 25 snaps of really good disruptive football every game. Beyond that, it's a projection and what you think he can do because he hasn't really done that. Because actually, if you look at his Pro Football Focus numbers, like I said, I had to go 3 years to get him close to being the amount of numbers that Riley Mills and Howard Cross had each of the last 2 years. Like his numbers in 3 years still weren't as many snaps as what Howard Cross and Riley Mills did in 2 years. Now, part of that's just because of the way that Louisville rotates their defensive line. I mean, they didn't have really any interior guys that like they had 5 interior guys that had 290 snaps or more. The most anyone had was 363. And they were 331, 360, 298, 260, 363, and 294. And Jared Dawson was the least at 294, but that's because he only played 12 games. So he averaged 29.4 snaps a game. That's it. And he never had a single game of 40, and he only had 5 games of over 30. And last year was the most snaps he played in a season. He had 1 game of over 30 in 2023. And in 2022, he had 2 games over 30. So he just hasn't played a lot of snaps. And so I don't know that he can give you 35 to 45 snaps regularly. I only know that he can give you 20 to 25, 25 to 30. That's it. That's all I know. So that's kind of how I feel about that one. So
agreed.
And then just wanted to respond to something that Andrew said as a follow-up to his question. He just to respond to that here real quick. Andrew said, I think Buckner could be very helpful in the red zone. He's pretty similar to Riley Leonard running wise. Leonard had 17 rushing touchdowns. Couldn't Buckner give us something similar? So just so we're clear on that, Andrew, I'm not saying Tyler Buckner couldn't help you. I'm saying you don't need him to. I don't need to, because you know who else I think could be really good in the red zone is Keidron Young, Jeremiah Love, you know what I mean? Like it's I don't need to waste reps during the week trying to get him the football when I can just get the football to number 21, or I get the football to number 4, or I can throw the football. So it's not that he can't help you. In other years, Andrew, I'd be way more willing to do that. That's why I was all about the package for him in 21. Even though Jack Cohn was my guy in 21, I was like, you're a fool not to get Tyler Buckner the football, because you could argue he was your most dynamic athlete on that 21 team. You could make that case. He was him and Chris Tyree were your 2 most dynamic offensive players. I just don't think that's the case anymore with the roster the way it is now, because you didn't have Jeremiah Love on the team. You didn't have Jadarian Price on that team. You didn't have Keidron Young on that team. This is a different team. So it's not that Tyler can't help you. It's just more so that I just don't need I don't need him to do that. I'd rather have the run-throw option of a CJ or a Kenny at quarterback as the throwers, and the run being Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, Aeneas, or Keidron. That's all. So I just want to make sure that you understand when I say that no to Tyler Buckner helping, it's not that I don't think he's physically capable of it. I think Tyler Buckner's a heck of an athlete. It's just at this point in time, there's just no need. So that's where I'm coming from on that. So yeah. Another thing too, Andrew had said, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Trev. Andrew said that he felt that Louisville sort of underachieved last year. Their D-line, wide receivers, and quarterback were pretty good. Getting the play calls in late really cost them against Notre Dame. Here's my thoughts on that, Trev. I actually don't think Louisville underachieved this year. I think it's that Louisville went 9-4 this year, beat Washington in a bowl game. I would say this: they had 1 bad loss, and that was at Stanford. But I think they made up for that with a great win on the road against Clemson that we wouldn't have expected. But they lost to Notre Dame by a touchdown, to SMU by a touchdown, and Miami by a touchdown. I just think that Miami and SMU were just better than people thought they were going to be. I think the Stanford game to me is the one you look back and with the regret say, how do you lose that game? And if you win that game, we're having a way different conversation about Louisville's season. But I think 9-4 is probably about where I thought they were going to be. So I don't think their team underachieved. I think their defense underachieved. That's where I think Louisville took a big step back. Is with their defense. I think that was the most disappointing part of their football team. And if you do accept the fact that they underachieved, if you're to grant that premise, I think that's exactly where it would be. And I'm actually surprised he brought Ron English back. I really am, because their defense was a train wreck at times this year. And I mean, you let Stanford go up and down the field on you. That was bad. That was really bad. You let SMU go up and down the field on you. You let Miami go up and down the field on you. Clemson moved the ball, although some of that came late. But I thought their defense was a major Georgia Tech moved the ball on you. Notre Dame moved the ball on you until they stopped trying to move the ball on you. I think their defense is what let them down. If you were to say it was an underachieving year, I would say they didn't underachieve, but I'm also not going to push back hard on that, because I think they were capable of more, but that's kind of what I expect Louisville to be. They're just an undisciplined program. But I think the Stanford game is the one thing that you look back and say, that's the game they should have won that they didn't win. And I think a lot of it's about their defense.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Stanford, they did exactly what they should have done this year, if I'm being 100% honest. And you could even make the argument that the blowout win at Clemson on the road kind of breaks even the embarrassing loss to Stanford, because then you go back through and you look at, I mean, they lost to SMU, who made the playoffs. They lost to Notre Dame on the road, who made it into the national championship game. They lost at home to Miami by a touchdown, but scored 45 points. They beat their rival Kentucky 41-14. They won in the postseason 35-34 against the Big Ten team. I think they achieved right at the level that they were supposed to with the team the way that they did. I mean, I liked Tyler Shuck as a quarterback. Was he one of the best quarterbacks in the country? No. I mean, I liked the receiving core of Ja'Cory Brooks and Colin Lacey and the Bell kid. Like, were they good? Yeah, absolutely. Did I like Isaac Brown? Yeah. Was he Jeremiah Love? No. Was Ja'Cory Brooks Jeremiah Smith? No. I mean, like, they were a good team, but I don't want to make it seem like they just had this group of all-stars that just kind of underperformed. I just think Louisville played.
The thing is, Trev, their offense wasn't their problem, though. I mean, like they scored 45 points against Miami and lost. They had 461 yards of offense and 6.7 yards per play against SMU and lost.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like their defense, even offensively against Stanford, they scored 35 points and lost.
Yeah.
You know, It's like their defense was a mess. Clemson was smart enough to recognize that they needed to make a change. I'm disappointed that Jeff Brom didn't do the same.
Yeah.
You know, because that was a problem for me, a big problem for me. But overall, record-wise, they were about what I kind of thought they'd be: 9-3 regular season, lose a bowl game, or go 8-4 and win a bowl game, because they had a tough schedule. Yeah, that's kind of how I thought it would be. The Stanford game is the one exception to that. Last question, Trev, and then we're gonna get out of here.
Will Brian Williams Jr. be a standout wide receiver?
I don't know, Salty. I put an update. I put an analysis of him on the board. There's a lot to like about this offer, and then there's reasons why you can understand why Bama, Georgia, Ohio. I think actually has Ohio State offered? No, they haven't offered yet. They've offered Messiah Hampton, the other kid I did an update on. But he's got a Florida offer, Arkansas, Notre Dame. Some good teams have offered him, but he's really raw. He's a teammate of Noah Grubbs. He's 6'4". He's 185, 190. He's a smooth, fluid athlete, really good leaper. He's got really good triple jump and high jump times. He's just not real fast. And I think that's the thing. And he's real raw overall, just real raw. This was really his first year playing varsity football on a regular basis. Only played 4 games a year before. There's a lot to work with there. And he's one of those kids, Trev, that when I look at him, you know, some guys you see that, like, they're not fast, but they're really good jumpers. And so you kind of feel like the evaluation is, hey, once this kid gets some weight room work, that vertical explosiveness will become to vertical explosiveness. You know what I mean? Like the jumping explosiveness becomes speed explosiveness. He's got good ball skills. He makes some tough catches. But he's got to get a lot stronger. And he's going to have to, and to become a guy that you get excited about, he needs to see another jump in speed. But he's that kind of guy. If you're going to sign a 3-man receiver class or a 4-man receiver class, you get him. He's the bottom of your list. You got to do better than him in the rest of your class. But then maybe in 3-4 years, he ends up becoming the best, you need some higher floors in the class with him, because he's one of those, what we were talking about earlier, he's one of those boomer bust guys. He could go to an SEC school or go to Notre Dame and you never hear from him because he just never takes that jump, or he's some 3-star kid and everybody's excited about these other 2 receivers that you sign. But then by their senior years, you're like, dude, that Brian Williams guy was a dog. He's that kind of player. So there's a lot to like there. I like the offer. Would I take him right now? We'll see. We'll see. But there's a lot to like there. He's just, you got to understand what you're getting. You're not getting a top 100 recruit. You're not getting a surefire come in and play as a freshman guy with where he is right now. You're getting a guy that's got a lot of tools. He's going to need a lot of development. He's the prototypical developmental receiver. Love the 6'4", love the frame, love the hands, love the ball skills, love the smooth athleticism. But that speed, he's going to have trouble separating at the next level. But if you view him as a guy that once he gets some weight room strength in him, and he's that guy like a Will Fuller who can gain a couple tenths of a second on his 40-yard dash time because he got in that college weight room, that's the kind of kid you take a look at. And that's the kind of kid I like. He just can't be your number 1 or number 2 in a receiver class. That's all. But there's a lot to like there. A lot to like there.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, that'll do it, Trev. You want to take us out of here, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Bryan, fun show. First show back that we've done in about a week and a half. Really good topics of discussion today. Really good submissions in the mailbag today, guys. Bryan and I will be back tomorrow. It's Wednesday tomorrow, so we will have our buy, sell, hold.
Y'all better bring it this week and buy, sell, hold. Just telling you, I'm excited about it. Don't let me down. Y'all got to come correct with the buy, sell, holds this week. I'm excited about it, so jump on the board. You got to be a premium member to leave a buy, sell, hold, Trev. So you know what they got to do. They got to get boards.irishbreakdown.com, become a premium member. We take premium. And if you're going to give a mailbag, if you're going to pay money to leave a mailbag or a buy, sell, hold, you might as well just use that money to go sign up for the message board. I'm just saying. Just saying. So go ahead and get that done. Go ahead and get that done.
Absolutely. But Bryan and I will be back here tomorrow at 1. The best way to stay in the loop is to subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com so you can get your buy, sell, holds submitted in time before tomorrow's show. But in the meantime, folks, if you could, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. Whichever platform you watch us on, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review, whether that is on Spotify podcast or Apple Podcasts. But until tomorrow for Buy, Sell, Hold, that's Bryan. I'm Trevor. We will see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.